Emily Carter slammed both hands flat on Victor Blackwell's table and looked him dead in the eye. Her father had been buried 3 days. His blood was barely dry in the Arizona soil. And the man who ordered his death was sitting right in front of her, smiling, like she was nothing more than a season's inconvenience. "You know what you did," she said, "and I have proof. 40 men were in that room. 40, not one of them moved. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled." Now let's go back to Red Hollow, Arizona, 1884, and find out what happens when one woman refuses to be erased. The box was made of pine, old and weather-worn, with her father's initials scratched into the lid by his own hand. Emily had carried it the entire 3 miles from the ranch into town, holding it against church like it was the most important thing left in the world. Because it was. It was the only piece of him that still had a voice. She had not eaten since the funeral, had not slept since the night she found the box hidden beneath the floorboards in her father's study, wrapped in oilcloth, buried under 7 years of careful silence. Her father had known they might come for it. He had known, and he had hidden it, and he had never told her because he was trying to protect her. He had been protecting her right up until the moment they made it look like an accident. The Red Hollow Trading Hall was full when she pushed through the door. It was a Thursday evening, end of the working week, and the place was loud with the kind of noise men make when they believe the world belongs to them. Boots on floorboards, glasses on wood, laughter that filled up the room and left no space for anyone else. She stood in the doorway for a moment, and not a single person acknowledged her. A woman alone, dressed in morning black, clutching a pine box to her chest. Invisible. She walked through the crowd anyway. She found Victor Blackwell at the back of the room at the large corner table he used like a throne. He always sat there. Everyone in Red Hollow knew it. He was a broad man, somewhere past 50, with the thick hands of someone who had done hard work once, and the easy confidence of someone who had spent the last 20 years making other people do it for him. His suit was expensive, his hat was expensive. Even the way he held his whiskey glass was expensive, like nothing he touched could ever be common. He had 3 men around him. His ranch foreman, a man named Doyle, who had arms like fence posts and eyes like a dog waiting to be told to bite. 2 others Emily did not know by name, but recognized by the particular way they watched everything around them without appearing to look at anything at all. Victor saw her coming. He did not stand, did not remove his hat. Just watched her approach with the faint, patient amusement of a man who has never once in his life felt threatened by a woman in mourning. Emily set the box on his table. She did not ask permission. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, and her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. "My father didn't die in an accident. You know exactly what happened to him, and so do I." The room did not go quiet all at once. It went quiet in pieces, the conversations nearest to them first, then spreading outward like ripples from a stone dropped in still water, until the only sound left was the creak of the building settling and someone's nervous boot shifting against the floorboards. Victor Blackwell looked at the box. Then he looked at Emily. Then he smiled. "Miss Carter," he said, and his voice was warm in that particular way that powerful men make warmth feel like a threat. "You have been through something terrible. Losing a father is a grief that can cloud a person's thinking. I understand that, I genuinely do." "My thinking is not clouded," Emily said. "My father kept records, 7 years of them. Land transactions, payment records, the names of men who witnessed contracts they were never shown. He documented everything." She opened the box. Inside were papers, neat stacks of them, her father's careful handwriting filling page after page. Account books, letters, copies of contracts with notations in the margins. The accumulated evidence of a man who had seen something wrong and had spent years quietly, methodically documenting it because he believed the truth was worth protecting, even if he could not yet figure out how to use it. She lifted the top page and placed it on the table in front of Victor. "This is a record of the sale of Thomas Reed's lower pasture land," she said. "Dated 3 years ago. The amount recorded in your ledgers is $40 less per acre than what Thomas Reed signed for. Someone changed those numbers after the fact. My father saw it happen." Victor did not look at the paper. He kept looking at her. "Your father," he said slowly, "was a bookkeeper who occasionally let his imagination run away from him. It was, if I'm being kind, his most significant failing. Don't talk about him like that." "I'll talk about him however I please," Victor said, and the warmth dropped out of his voice like a stone falling through water. "He's gone. And you're standing in my hall, in front of my men, making accusations you cannot prove, about a man who cannot speak for himself. He reached across the table and picked up the page she had placed there. He looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, then he tore it in half. Emily did not flinch. She had told herself she would not flinch, and she did not. Nobody in this valley, Victor continued, folding the torn pieces together and setting them aside like they were nothing at all, is going to believe a grieving woman accusing the most successful rancher in Arizona of murder. Not the judge, not the marshal, not anyone in this room. He gestured around them with one broad hand. These are my people, Miss Carter. They work for me, they trade with me, they live on land that I have helped develop and protect for the last 15 years. You are one woman with a box of papers and a story about numbers that don't add up. I would encourage you, very sincerely, to go home. Emily reached into the box and placed another paper on the table. This one is about Henry Parker's property, she said. And this one is about the Collins family's water rights. And this one, she placed a third, then a fourth, spreading them across the surface in front of him, is a letter my father wrote to the Territorial Land Office 6 months before he died. He never sent it. He was afraid, but he wrote it, and it names you Mr. Blackwell by name with specific dates and specific amounts. Victor's smile did not change, but something behind his eyes did. He looked at Doyle. Doyle stepped forward and swept every paper off the table with one arm. They scattered across the floor, and the box tipped and fell, and Emily dropped to her knees automatically to gather them, her hands moving fast, her breath coming short. Someone laughed from across the room, a low, contemptuous sound that cut through the air and made her face burn. She kept gathering the papers. She would not cry in front of them. She had promised herself that, Miss Carter. Victor's voice came from above her, leisurely, unbothered. If you do not leave this hall in the next 60 seconds, I will have Doyle escort you out. And when he does, I will make sure everyone in this valley understands that you are an unstable young woman suffering from grief-induced delusions. I will make sure the Territorial Bank understands that the Carter Ranch's accounts were in disorder before your father died. I will make sure the land office knows to expect a dispute about your property boundaries. He paused. I have been doing this for a long time. You are not the first person to wave papers at me. You will not be the last, and none of them are standing in this valley anymore. Emily got to her feet. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs so nobody would see it. You killed my father, she said. Prove it. She looked around the room. She looked at the ranch workers who sat with their eyes on their glasses, at the merchants who had developed a sudden fascination with the far wall, at Sheriff Hale, who was seated 3 tables away and was presently engaged in examining the brim of his hat with extraordinary care, as though it were the most complex object he had ever encountered. She looked at all of them and she understood, in a way that she had not entirely understood before she walked through that door, that understanding something intellectually and feeling it in your chest are 2 completely different things. These men were not going to help her, not because they thought Victor was right. She could see it in the small, uncomfortable adjustments they all made, the way eyes moved to the floor, the way shoulders tightened, the way hands wrapped around glasses a little tighter. They knew. Most of them probably knew exactly what Victor Blackwell was and what he was capable of. They were not going to help her because they were afraid. She had spent 3 days telling herself that if she could just get to a room full of people, if she could just say it out loud in front of witnesses, something would happen. Someone would speak. Someone would stand up. Because that was what people did. That was what the world was supposed to work like. The world, she was learning, did not always work like it was supposed to. Please, she said. It came out quieter than she intended. She had not planned to say it. It was not a word she had brought with her. It rose up from somewhere below the place where plans lived, from the part of her that was 24 years old and had buried her father 4 days ago, and was standing in a room full of people and had never felt more alone. Please help me. 39 men sat absolutely still. And then, from the darkest corner of the room, the back corner near the side door, the corner where the lantern light barely reached, the corner where a man had been sitting so quietly for so long that most of the room had forgotten, a chair scraped back against the floorboards. A man stood. He was not particularly large, not the biggest man in the room, not the most obviously dangerous. He wore trail-worn clothes, a coat that had seen better seasons, boots with dust still on them from the road. He had the look of someone who had been traveling for a long time and had not yet decided where he was going to stop. His face was angular, weathered, the kind of face that did not give much away unless you knew how to read the particular stillness that comes from years of learning to keep your expressions to yourself. He stood up, and he looked across the room at Victor Blackwell. Victor looked back at him. And for just a fraction of a second, so brief that only Emily, who was watching Victor's face with the concentrated attention of someone whose survival depended on reading him correctly, actually caught it, something moved behind Victor Blackwell's eyes. Not fear. Victor Blackwell did not feel fear, or at least had not felt it in so long that he would not have recognized the sensation. But something adjacent to it. Something that looked like the particular wariness of a man who has just realized that a situation he believed he controlled has, without warning, produced a variable he did not account for. "You don't want to do this," Victor said. The stranger walked out from the corner. He walked slowly, unhurried, with the particular kind of steadiness that is not the absence of caution but the presence of decision. He crossed the floor and stopped roughly 10 feet from Victor's table, close enough to be unambiguous, far enough to give everyone in the room a clear view of where he stood. "The lady asked for help," the man said. His voice was quiet, not raised, not performing, just clear and level and impossible to misinterpret. "You don't know who you're talking to," Victor said. "I know exactly who I'm talking to." Victor leaned back in his chair. He was reassembling his ease around himself the way a man puts on a coat in cold weather, deliberately, with some effort. "You're a drifter," he said. "You've been in this town for what, 12 hours? You don't know anything about this situation. You don't know anything about this valley or these people, or what this woman has been saying about me. And whatever she's told you, she hasn't told me anything," the man said. "I've been sitting in that corner for 3 hours. I heard what she said. I heard what you said. I heard everything that's happened in this room tonight." He paused. So did every person in here. The silence in the room tightened. Victor's jaw set. "Who are you?" Doyle said from behind his employer's shoulder. "Nobody worth worrying about," the man said. He did not look at Doyle when he said it. He was still looking at Victor. "You got a name, Drifter?" A pause. "Caleb Walker." Victor went very still. It was the stillness of a man who has just heard a name he did not expect to hear and is rapidly revising several calculations he thought he had already completed. His eyes moved over Caleb Walker with a different quality of attention than before, not dismissal, not amusement. "Assessment." "Caleb Walker," Victor repeated, tasting the name the way a man tests ice before stepping onto it. "I've heard that name. I expect you have. You used to work for the territory." "I used to do a lot of things." "As I recall," Victor said, and his voice had taken on a new texture, still controlled, still measured, but with something underneath it now that had not been there before. "A federal inquiry stripped you of your badge or standing about 7 years ago. Corruption charges. Taking payments from the very ranch owners you were supposed to be investigating." He tilted his head. "Is that right?" "That's what the record says," Caleb agreed. "So you're not just a drifter. You're a disgraced drifter." Victor looked around the room, addressing the audience he had never stopped performing for. "A man with a criminal history is vouching for a grieving woman's accusations against me. That is the situation we're in. That is who has decided to stand up for Emily Carter tonight." He spread his hands. Generous. Reasonable. The picture of a man being extraordinarily patient with a world full of troublesome people. "I'll ask you one more time, Walker. Sit down. Take your drink. Leave this to the people who actually live here." Caleb Walker reached down and picked up one of the scattered pages from the floor. He straightened it carefully and looked at it for a long moment. Then he held it up so Victor could see it. "Henry Parker's lower 40 acres," he said. "Sold under duress in the spring of 1878. The recorded price was $16 an acre." He lowered the paper. "The actual value at the time was $23. Somebody changed the paperwork after Parker signed it. Somebody who had access to the land office records between the date of sale and the date of official filing." He looked at Victor. "I've been following that particular somebody for about 8 months." The room had gone absolutely quiet. Not the performance quiet of before, the careful, studied silence of men pretending not to hear. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that happens when something unexpected walks into a room and everyone realizes, simultaneously, that the situation they thought they understood has just changed into something else entirely. Victor Blackwell looked at Caleb Walker. Caleb Walker looked at Victor Blackwell. And Emily Carter, standing between them with her father's papers clutched to her chest, understood that she had walked into this room tonight thinking she was starting a fight. She had not understood until this moment that the fight had already been going on for years. She looked at the stranger, at Caleb Walker, Disgraced investigator. Man without a ranch or a badge or anything the world generally used to determine whether a person was worth listening to, and she said, very quietly, "You know about my father." He did not look away from Victor. "I know about the men before your father," he said, "and the men before them. Your father wasn't the first person who tried to document what Victor Blackwell was doing with land in this valley. He was just the first one careful enough to do it right." Victor's hand moved toward Doyle. It was a small gesture. But Caleb foresaw it. "Don't," he said. Just the one word. But the way he said it steady, certain, the way a man speaks when he has thought clearly about consequences and made his peace with them, made Doyle's hand stop where it was. Victor looked at his foreman. Then he looked back at Caleb. "You have nothing," Victor said. "Whatever you've been collecting, whatever she's brought in that box, it isn't enough. You know how this territory works. You know that a piece of paper means nothing without a judge willing to sign his name to an opinion, and I know every judge in a 3-county radius. You know that witnesses mean nothing if nobody is willing to testify, and the people in this room," he gestured around them, encompassing the ranch hands, the merchants, the sheriff examining his hat brim, have families to think about, lives to protect. You're one-man Walker. You've got no badge, no standing, no official position. You're a convicted corrupt investigator and a drifter, and you're standing in my hall, telling me you've been building a case against me for 8 months. He leaned forward slightly. "What exactly do you think is going to happen next?" Caleb Walker looked at him for a long, measured moment. "I think," he said finally, "that you just tore up evidence in front of 39 witnesses. I think that in about 20 minutes, Miss Carter and I are going to walk out of here with what's left of her father's papers. I think that tomorrow morning I'm going to sit down and write a letter to the territorial capital that I've been meaning to write for 6 months, and I'm going to send it this time." He paused. "And I think that a man who spent 15 years making sure everybody in this valley is too afraid to look at him directly might want to consider what happens when one person stops being afraid. Because in my experience, Mr. Blackwell, fear is like a fever. Once it breaks, it doesn't come back the same way." Victor stared at him. Then he picked up his whiskey glass and took a long, slow drink. "Get him out," he said to Doyle. Emily moved before Doyle could reach her. She scooped up the remaining papers from the floor, shoved them into the box, and got to her feet. Caleb moved to stand beside her. Not in front of her, beside her, his shoulder an inch from hers. A clear and unambiguous statement about where he stood without a single word to announce it. Doyle stopped. Because Caleb Walker was looking at him with the particular expression of a man who has made careful calculations and arrived at a number he is entirely comfortable with, and that number was not in Doyle's favor. "We're leaving," Caleb said to Emily. "Not a question." "Yes," she said. They walked through the room together. The crowd parted. Nobody tried to stop them. Nobody spoke. Emily kept her eyes forward and her chin up, and did not look at the men on either side of her, because if she looked at them, she might say something. And if she said something, it would not be the kind of thing she could take back. And she needed to save her voice for fights that could actually be won. They walked out into the Arizona night, and the door closed behind them, and the noise of the trading hall swallowed itself up again like it had never been interrupted. Emily stood in the dark, holding the box against her chest, breathing in the cold, clean air that was nothing like the air inside. She waited until she was certain her voice would not shake. "You've been following this for 8 months, she said. "Closer to 9, Caleb said. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Above them, the Arizona sky was enormous and full of stars, the kind of sky that makes a person feel small in a way that is not entirely unpleasant. A reminder that the world is bigger than whatever room you've just walked out of. "Because 7 years ago," he said, "a man named Blackwell, not Victor, his brother Raymond, destroyed my career and my name, and made sure I couldn't work in this territory again. And because the network that protected Raymond Blackwell is the same network that's been Victor Blackwell for the last 15 years. And because I spent 6 years being angry about it, and 1 year deciding that anger without action is just suffering with no return." He looked down at the box in her arms. "I didn't know about your father until 4 months ago. I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner." Emily looked at him. In the dark, she could see the particular tiredness in his face that had nothing to do with sleep, the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. "The accusation they used against you," she said. "The corruption charges. Were they prove that?" "Yes," he said. "That's part of what I've been building." She held the box out to him. He looked at it without taking it. "I have copies," she said. My father made copies and hid them in 3 different places because he understood that a man like Victor Blackwell never stops at destroying one thing. He understood that destroying the evidence and destroying the person aren't always enough, and so he planned for the version of events where all of that happened. She pushed the box slightly closer. He planned for tonight. He just didn't plan on not being here for it. Caleb took the box from her. He held it carefully, the way a man holds something that belongs to someone else. "We need to get back to your ranch," he said. "I know. And we need to talk about who in this valley might be willing to testify, because without witnesses we have documents and a theory. And nothing else." "I know that too. It's going to be a long night." "Mr. Walker," Emily said, and she turned and started walking. "I have been having long nights for 4 days. I know what they are. Come on." He fell into step beside her, and they walked together through the dark into the Arizona countryside. And neither of them spoke about the fact that, somewhere behind them in the trading hall, Victor Blackwell was already making plans. They did not need to say it, they both already knew. The question was not whether Victor would come for them. The question was whether they would be ready when he did. And Emily Carter had her father's voice in her head, his careful, methodical, quietly determined voice telling her that ready was not a condition that arrived on its own. Ready was something you built, one piece at a time, starting with whatever you had in your hands. She was holding a box full of 7 years of work. She was walking beside a man who had spent 9 months building a case. She had, she thought, more than nothing. Outside in the cold and the dark and the vastness of the Arizona territory, that felt like the beginning of something. She was not sure yet exactly what, but she was walking toward it, and she was not walking alone. The Carter Ranch was 3 miles from town, and they covered those miles in near silence, each of them turning over the weight of what had just happened without yet being ready to speak it out loud. The night was cold the way Arizona got cold in the late months, not vicious, not biting, but present, a reminder that the land did not particularly care about the problems of the people living on it. Emily walked fast. Caleb matched her pace without comment. When they reached the ranch, Emily went straight to the barn. Not the house, the barn. Caleb followed without asking why. She set the box down on a work table and lit a lantern. Then she moved to the back corner of the barn, to a section of wall that looked identical to every other section of wall, and pressed her palm flat against a specific plank. It swung inward on a hidden hinge. Behind it was a shallow space, maybe 8 inches deep, running the length of 2 planks. Inside were more papers, older ones, a second ledger. A rolled length of canvas tied with cord. Caleb looked at the hidden space and then at Emily. "Your father built this," he said. "He built it the winter before I turned 16, Emily said. She did not reach for the papers yet. She stood looking at them the way you look at something that has been waiting for you for a long time. "He told me it was a root cellar for seed storage. I believed him for years. He was a careful man. Careful and quiet and absolutely certain that the truth was worth protecting even when nobody was willing to listen to it." "He was right," Caleb said. "He's dead," Emily said. Not bitterly, just plainly, the way a person states a fact they have not yet entirely made peace with. Being right didn't keep him alive. Caleb said nothing, which was the correct response. Emily reached into the hidden space and pulled out the second ledger. She set it on the work table beside the box and opened it to the first page. Her father's handwriting again, that same careful, precise hand, each number sitting exactly where it was supposed to sit, each notation clear and deliberate. "This one goes back further," she said. "Before the Parker land. Before the Collins water rights. All the way back to 1875, before Victor Blackwell was the most powerful man in the valley. Back when he was just becoming the most powerful man in the valley." She turned to a page near the middle. "Right here. A land transaction involving a rancher named Elias Crane." "You know that name?" Caleb went still. "Crane," he said. Elias Crane owned the northern quarter of what is now Victor Blackwell's primary grazing land. He sold it in the fall of 1876 for a price that my father noted was less than half of what comparable land was selling for in the same season. She looked up. My father went back and looked at the original deed. The terms of sale referenced a debt that Crane owed to the Territorial Agricultural Bank, except when my father tried to find the original loan documents. "They didn't exist," Caleb said. Emily stared at him. "You already knew." "Not about Crane specifically. But the agricultural bank closed in 1879, and every record it held was consolidated into the Territorial Land Office. The consolidation was managed by a man named Gerald Pruitt, who was at that time a junior clerk and is currently the senior records administrator for the entire territory. Caleb sat down on a crate across from the work table. When I started building this case 8 months ago, Pruitt's name showed up in 4 different property disputes. Every single time, there was a gap in the documentation. A missing page, a misfiled record, a date that didn't match the corresponding deed. He looked at the ledger. Your father found the same thread I did. He just found it from a different end. He found it from the inside, Emily said. He was hired by Victor Blackwell to manage accounts. That's how he had access to the original numbers. He could see what the official record said, and he could see what the actual transactions looked like, and they didn't match. And when did he stop working for Blackwell? Emily was quiet for a moment. 3 years ago. He quit without giving a reason, at least not one, he told Blackwell. He told me afterward that he had seen something that changed everything. He wouldn't tell me what it was. He just said he needed time to verify it before he talked about it. She closed the ledger carefully. He never had enough time. Caleb leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked at the ledger, and then at the hidden space in the wall, and then at Emily, who was standing in the lantern light with her father's work spread out in front of her, and the specific exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a grief so large for so many days that it has started to feel like it is simply part of them. What he found 3 years ago, Caleb said. Whatever it was that made him quit, do you have any idea? I have one, Emily said. She reached back into the hidden space and brought out the rolled canvas. She set it on the table and untied the cord and unrolled it. It was a map, hand-drawn, precise, the kind of detailed rendering that took hours to produce. It showed the valley in its entirety, every property boundary, every water source, every road, and drawn across it in her father's hand in red ink were lines connecting property after property in a pattern that moved across the map like a web. Caleb stood and leaned over the map. He was quiet for a long time. That's not just land fraud, he said finally. No, Emily agreed. It's a planned consolidation. Every property marked in red has either already been acquired by Victor Blackwell, or she pointed to severals marked with a red circle, but no connecting line, still outstanding. Not yet taken. He's building toward something. The water, Emily said. And she traced a line with her finger from the connected parcels, down toward the valley's primary water source, a river that ran along the eastern edge of the valley and fed the irrigation systems for every ranch on the southern side. If he acquires these last 4 parcels, he controls both banks of the river for the entire length of the valley. Every ranch downstream depends on that water. She pulled her hand back. He doesn't just want to own the land. He wants to own what the land needs to survive. Caleb straightened. He looked at the map for another long moment. Then he said, "Which of those 4 remaining parcels is the most valuable?" Emily did not need to look. "Ours," she said. The word landed in the barn like a stone dropped into deep water, and the silence after it had weight. Caleb looked at her. "Your father didn't die in an accident," he said. "He died because Victor Blackwell needed his land, and he was the one person in the valley who understood exactly what that land meant." "I know," Emily said, "and now you're the one who owns it." "I know that too." She rolled the map back up carefully and tied the cord around it. "Mr. Walker, I have known since the morning I found this box that Victor Blackwell was going to come for this ranch. I walked into that trading hall tonight because I wanted witnesses. Because I wanted people to see him in the same room as the evidence. Because I thought." She stopped. "I thought if enough people could see it at once, something would have to happen." "Something did happen," Caleb said. "One man stood up," Emily said, and there was no judgment in her voice. She was not diminishing what he had done. She was simply accounting for it accurately. 1 man out of 40. 1 man is how every single thing that matters ever started, Caleb said. He said it quietly, without emphasis, not as an argument, but as a fact he had learned from experience and no longer needed to defend. The other 39 aren't fixed in place. People aren't afraid because they want to be. They're afraid because nobody has given them a reason to believe it's safe to stop. And how do we give them that reason? We build a case that doesn't require bravery to support, Caleb said. We find the evidence that is so complete, so documented, so airtight, that the risk of speaking the truth becomes smaller than the risk of staying quiet. We find the witnesses who have the most to lose by Victor remaining in power, and we show them what losing it actually looks like. He paused. And we move fast, because the moment we walked out of that trading hall tonight, Victor Blackwell started thinking about how to make sure we never get to file anything with anyone. Emily looked at him steadily. "How long?" she said. "A week, maybe less." And in the meantime, I'm alone on a ranch that Victor Blackwell wants to own, and I'm holding evidence that Victor Blackwell wants to destroy." "You're not alone," Caleb said. It was said simply with no dramatics. A statement of position, not a promise of safety. Emily heard the difference and appreciated it. She had had enough of promises. What she needed was someone who was willing to be honest about what things actually were. "The couch in the main room," she said, "isn't comfortable. I've slept on worse, I don't doubt it." She gathered the ledger and the map and set them back into replaced the plank and picked up the original box. "There are 3 names in my father's records of people who saw things directly. Thomas Reed, who witnessed the altered Parker contract. Martha Collins, who processed records in the land office before Pruitt took over. And Henry Parker himself, who sold the land and knew at the time the terms weren't right, but needed the money too badly to fight it." She looked at Caleb. "Are any of them likely to talk?" "Thomas Reed is afraid of his own shadow," Caleb said. "I've tried to approach him twice. Both times he walked away before I could finish a sentence. He lives on Blackwell's land now, works on Blackwell's ranch. He's got nowhere to go if he loses that position." He thought about it. "Martha Collins is more interesting. She left the land office 3 years ago and moved back to her sister's property on the north side of the valley. She doesn't work for Blackwell, doesn't depend on him, and from what I've been able to gather, she did not leave her position voluntarily." Emily's eyes sharpened. Pruitt pushed her out. "That's my read, yes. Which means she may have reasons of her own to want this opened up." "And Henry Parker?" Caleb let out a slow breath. "Parker lost his land 6 years ago and spent 2 years trying to dispute the sale through official channels. Every avenue got closed in front of him. He's farming a 12-acre plot on the western edge now, barely making it work, and he hasn't spoken publicly about Blackwell in 3 years." He paused. "But there are things a man stops saying out loud that he doesn't stop believing." "Then we start with Martha Collins," Emily said. "Tomorrow." First light, Caleb agreed. He turned to go, then stopped. "Miss Carter, he's Emily," she said without turning around. "If we're going to do this, use my name." He was quiet for a moment. "Emily," he said. "You walked into that hall tonight knowing what you were walking into. I walked in hoping it would go differently than it did." "That's not what I mean. You went in knowing you might be walking out empty-handed, and you went anyway. With your father's papers and nothing else." He paused. That took something. Emily set the box down on the work table. She stood with her back to him, and her hands flat on the wood surface, and she breathed in slowly through her nose. "My father spent 7 years being careful," she said. 7 years building evidence and verifying details and waiting for exactly the right moment to act. And he ran out of time before the moment came. She picked the box back up. "I don't have 7 years. I don't even know if I have 7 days. So I went in with what I had and I said what I knew to be true in front of witnesses, because doing something imperfect was better than doing nothing perfectly." She finally looked over her shoulder at him. "Now go get some sleep, Mr. Walker. We have a long week ahead of us." He almost smiled. It was the kind of almost smile that a man produces when he is not accustomed to smiling and has found something that makes him want to remember how. "Caleb," he said, "if we're doing this." She turned away again. But she was the one who almost smiled this time, alone in the lantern light where nobody could see it. "Good night, Caleb," she said. The next morning arrived gray and cold, the sun still below the eastern hills, and Emily was already awake. She had slept 3 hours, which was 2 more than she expected. She had made coffee on the wood stove and was reading through her father's ledger for the 4th time when Caleb came in from the main room. His hair, still carrying the impression of sleep, moving with the particular caution of someone who has spent enough time in other people's homes to know the rules of being a careful guest. He looked at the open ledger and the coffee, and then at Emily. "You found something," he said. "I found something last night, and I didn't see it until just now," she said. She turned the ledger to face him and pointed to an entry near the bottom of the page. "My father noted a discrepancy in 1879 that I read as a recording error. A parcel of land listed under a name I didn't recognize, Horace Lund. No other reference to Lund anywhere in the ledger. I thought it was a dead end." She reached across the table and pulled a folded paper from beside the coffee pot. "This morning I remembered that my father kept a separate address book. Business contacts. I found it in the box under everything else and I almost missed it." She unfolded the paper. It was a page torn from a small notebook, names and addresses in 2 columns. "Horace Lund," she said, pointing. "Listed here with an address in Tucson and a notation in my father's handwriting." She read it aloud. "Witness to original Crane deed. Alive as of June 1883. Caleb stared at the page. Your father found a living witness to the first transaction in the chain, he said. A witness who apparently survived long enough to be alive as of 14 months ago, Emily said. Which means there's a chance he's still alive now. And if he is? The one person who can testify to what the original crane sale looked like from the outside, Caleb said. Before Blackwell's people got to the records. Before Pruitt changed anything, he straightened. Emily, if Lund is still alive and will talk, that changes this entire case. Then we need to talk to Martha Collins and find out if she knows anything about Lund, Emily said. Because my father put them in different parts of his records, which means he may have kept them separate deliberately. He may have known that Pruitt was looking for Lund too. Caleb picked up his hat from the table. He turned it in his hands once. Victor knew last night that I've been building this case, he said. He heard me say it. He's going to move fast. He's going to go after the witnesses before we can reach them. How do you know he doesn't already have people watching Martha Collins? I don't, Caleb said. Which is why we need to leave in the next 20 minutes. They rode hard through the cold morning, Emily on her father's roan and Caleb on the gray gelding he'd brought into town the morning before, and they covered the 9 miles to the northern edge of the valley in just over an hour. The Collins property was a modest operation, a house, a small stable, a kitchen garden that had been put to bed for the season. Smoke from the chimney, a woman in the yard splitting wood. Emily had met Martha Collins twice, both times briefly, at the trading post. She was somewhere in her late 40s, sturdy, with the particular no-nonsense quality of someone who had spent a career dealing with paperwork and bureaucracy, and had emerged from it with very little patience for dishonesty. Martha saw them coming, and kept splitting wood until they were close enough to talk. Then she set her axe down and looked at them. I heard you walked into the trading hall last night, she said to Emily. Not greeting, not preamble, just the fact stated plainly. Word travels fast, Emily said. Word always travels fast when Victor Blackwell is involved, Martha said. She looked at Caleb. You're the one who stood up. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said. Martha studied him for a moment. Whatever she was looking for, she apparently found enough of it to continue. Come inside, she said. You didn't ride 9 miles to stand in my yard. Inside. At a table over coffee, neither of them had been offered so much as had appeared in front of them, with thieves who understood hospitality as a practical transaction rather than a performance. Martha Collins sat across from them and said, What do you need from me? We need to know about Gerald Pruitt, Caleb said. Martha's jaw tightened. Just a fraction, just enough. Pruitt, she said. You left the land office 3 years ago, Emily said. I was asked to leave, Martha said. Pruitt told the territorial administrator that my record-keeping had become inconsistent and unreliable. The administrator accepted that explanation without asking to see any specific examples of the alleged inconsistency. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I had been managing those records for 11 years. I had never made a significant error in 11 years. And I was removed in the same month that I noticed something wrong with the consolidation files from the agricultural bank closure. What did you notice? Caleb asked. There was a record of a land transfer involving Elias Crane, Martha said, and the air in the room changed. Emily felt it. Caleb went very still beside her. Martha did not seem surprised by their reactions. I noticed it because the filing date on the transfer didn't match the date stamped on the corresponding deed copy. There was a 6-week gap between when the deed was supposedly executed and when it was filed. In 11 years, I had never seen a gap that large in a routine land transfer. So I pulled the original and compared it against the consolidated records from the bank closure. And Emily said, the terms were different, Martha said. The original deed listed a debt amount of $400 owed to the agricultural bank. The consolidated record listed the same debt at $960. She paused. The difference was the difference between Crane being able to pay his debt and keep his land, and being forced to sell at whatever price Blackwell offered. Someone changed the debt amount during consolidation, Caleb said. Someone changed the debt amount, Martha confirmed. And the only person who had access to both the original records and the consolidated files during that period was Gerald Pruitt. Did you report it? Emily asked. I wrote a formal notation in the file and brought it to the administrator's attention, Martha said. He told me he would look into it. 3 weeks later, Pruitt told me my services were no longer required. She said it without bitterness, in the flat tone of someone who has processed an injustice so thoroughly that it no longer produces heat, only clarity. I went home. I kept a copy of the notation I had filed. The table went quiet. You kept a copy, Caleb said. I keep copies of everything, Martha said. 11 years in a land office will teach you that. She looked at Emily. Your father came to see me, about a year after I left. He'd found the same discrepancy from a different direction, through the accounting side. He wanted to know if I had anything. I gave him what I had. Emily felt something shift in her chest. You helped him. I gave him what I had, Martha repeated, which was a copy of a notation that an administrator had agreed to look into and then done nothing about. I wasn't certain it was enough. I told your father that, he said. She paused, and something moved across her face that was not quite grief, but was adjacent to it, the look of someone recalling words that have acquired new weight since they were spoken. He said that it wasn't enough yet, but that it was one more brick in the wall, and that eventually there would be enough bricks. Emily pressed her hands flat against the table and looked down at them and breathed. Miss Carter, Martha said, and her voice had shifted, not softer exactly, but more direct, the way a woman speaks when she has decided to stop being careful. I've been sitting on what I have for 3 years because I live alone on 12 acres and I'm not a young woman, and I have watched what happens to people who challenge Victor Blackwell. She paused. But I have also been sitting here watching it happen and being angry about it every single day. And you walked into that trading hall last night with your father's box and faced that man down by yourself, and this morning you rode 9 miles to talk to me. She looked from Emily to Caleb and back. What do you need? Your testimony, Caleb said, and your copy of that notation. And whatever else your father gave you or told you, that you have kept since then. There's something else, Emily said. She leaned forward. Do you know a man named Horace Lund? Martha Collins went completely still. It was a different kind of stillness from Victor Blackwell's stillness in the trading hall. That had been the stillness of calculation. This was the stillness of recognition of a person hearing a name they did not expect to hear and reassessing, rapidly, what it meant that it had been said. Where did you hear that name? Martha said. My father's address book, Emily said. Listed as a witness to the original Crane deed, alive as of last summer. Lund, Martha said slowly, is why Pruitt pushed me out when he did and not 6 months earlier. She looked at Caleb. Lund came to the land office in the spring of 1880. He was there for another matter, entirely a survey dispute on a piece of property he owned outside Tucson. While he was there, he mentioned to me, in passing, that he had been a witness to the signing of the Crane land transfer. I wrote his name in the margin of a file, a notation. Nothing official. She paused. 2 weeks later, Pruitt went through my desk. He found the notation, Caleb said. He found the notation. But by then I had already written down Lund's address from the contact information he had provided for his survey matter. She looked at Emily. Your father's address book. How did he have Lund's address? I gave it to him, Martha said simply. When he came to see me that year, I gave him everything I had. Caleb leaned back. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, and Emily could see him reorganizing information, building the shape of something that had just become larger and more solid than it was before they walked through Martha's door. Lund is in Tucson, he said as Martha said. Whether he still is, I don't know. That was 3 years ago. If he's alive, Caleb said, and if he'll testify, we have the original transaction. We have the altered records. We have the accounting discrepancies your father documented. We have the pattern across multiple properties. He looked at Emily. That's a case. That's the beginning of a case, Emily said. We still need someone to bring it to. The territorial court, Caleb said. There's a circuit judge who comes through Tucson every 3 months. Judge Aldous Marsh. He's not one of Blackwell's people, I know this, because I spent considerable time figuring out which judges were and which weren't before I started doing anything else. When does he come through next? Emily asked. 5 weeks. The number sat between them. Victor won't wait 5 weeks, Emily said. No, Caleb agreed. He won't. They looked at each other across the table, and the calculation was the same for both of them, the time they had against the time they needed, the resources they had against the resources Victor Blackwell had, the witnesses who might speak against the fear that had been growing in this valley for 15 years. Martha Collins set her coffee cup down. You're going to need to talk to Henry Parker, she said, and you're going to need to talk to Thomas Reed. Reed is on Blackwell's property, Caleb said. He won't. Thomas Reed has a daughter, Martha said. She's 11 years old and she goes to the schoolhouse in Red Hollow 3 days a week. Her teacher is a woman named Clara Abbott who has nothing to do with Victor Blackwell and never has. She looked at Caleb steadily. Thomas Reed is afraid for himself. But I have watched that man look at his daughter every Sunday at church for 3 years, and I can tell you with certainty that he is more afraid of the world she is going to grow up in than he is of Victor Blackwell. She paused. Give him the right reason and the right moment. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. Then he nodded. What about you? Emily asked Martha. Testifying means putting yourself in front of Victor Blackwell. He'll come at you the same way he came at my father. Your father came to me alone, Martha said. He had a box of papers and a case he hadn't yet built enough to stand on in court. He was one person trying to do something that required more than one person. She straightened in her chair with the deliberate posture of someone who has made a decision and is settling into it. You're not alone, and neither am I if what you're telling me is true. She looked at Emily. Is it? Is there actually a case here, or is this My father spent 7 years building it, Emily said. Caleb has spent 9 months building it from the other side. The evidence is real. The witnesses are real. The pattern is documented. She held Martha's gaze. It's real. Martha was quiet for a moment, then yes, she said. I'll testify. They left the Collins property with Martha's copy of the land office notation in Emily's coat pocket, a list of 3 additional potential witnesses Martha had named, and a weight in both of them that was not quite hope, but was the thing that comes just before hope, the first solid certainty that the ground beneath you is real and will hold. They were riding back through the valley, still a mile from the Carter Ranch, when Caleb said, There's something I haven't told you. Emily looked at him. The false accusation that destroyed my career, he said. He was watching the road ahead, his voice level, his face carrying that practiced stillness. It wasn't only Raymond Blackwell who built it. There were 3 other men involved. One of them is currently working as a deputy under Sheriff Hale in Red Hollow. Emily was quiet for a moment. You knew before last night that our sheriff was connected to this. I knew before I rode into Red Hollow, Caleb said. It's one of the reasons I came. Is that the only reason? A pause, longer than the ones before it. The road stretched out ahead of them, and the morning light was just beginning to cut through the gray overcast, and the valley lay around them in its vast quiet, beautiful and indifferent. No, Caleb said. He did not elaborate, and Emily, who had spent the last 4 days moving from grief to fury to something that was starting to feel like determination, found that she did not need him to. There were things that became clear between people, not through the words they said, but through the ones they chose not to say, and the space those unsaid words occupied, and whether the other person had the patience to let them rest there. Emily was beginning to understand that Caleb Walker was, at his core, a man who had been waiting for a long time to stop running from what he knew was right, and that whatever had brought him to Red Hollow 9 months ago, whatever thread he had been pulling on in isolation, he had not entirely expected it to lead him here, to this road, to this valley, to a woman with a pine box and a stubborn refusal to look away from the truth. She did not say any of that out loud either. She rode, and he rode beside her, and when they reached the Carter Ranch and saw the fresh tracks in the dirt outside the barn tracks, that had not been there. When they left that morning, they both registered them at the same moment and both reached the same conclusion without speaking it. Someone had been here. Caleb was off his horse before Emily could speak, and Emily was right behind him. And when they pushed open the barn door and saw that the hidden panel in the wall was still intact, still closed, still holding everything behind it exactly as they had left it, they both exhaled at the same moment. He was looking, Caleb said. He didn't find it, Emily said. Not yet. She turned and looked at him. We need to move faster, she said. We need to move smarter, he said. Moving fast and moving smart aren't always the same thing. Today they are, Emily said, and she was already crossing to the hidden panel, already reaching for the plank, already pulling out the ledger and the map and the box with the efficiency of someone who has decided that caution and courage are not opposites, and she intends to use every bit of both of them. Caleb watched her work, and he thought that he had spent 9 months in this valley, gathering evidence and building a case, and keeping himself deliberately apart from the people whose lives he was trying to affect, because involvement was a risk, and he had already paid once for the cost of trusting the wrong people. He had not planned on this. He had not planned on a woman who buried her father 4 days ago and walked into a room full of cowards that same night with nothing but the truth and the refusal to be silent. He had not planned on any of it. But he was here, and so was she. And Victor Blackwell had just sent someone to search her barn, which meant the clock that had been running in the background of everything since last night had just gotten louder. Caleb, Emily said. She was holding the map, looking at it, her finger tracing one of the red connecting lines. The 4 remaining parcels. If Victor moves to acquire them before we can file anything, if he uses the same methods he used on the others, the fake debts, the altered records, he can't do it as fast as he's done it before, Caleb said. Because before, there was nobody watching, nobody who knew what to look for. Now there's us, and if that's not enough. He was quiet for a moment. Then we make sure more people are watching, he said. Which means we need to talk to Henry Parker today. Emily rolled the map back up and held it against her chest and looked at him steadily. Her father's daughter, in her father's barn, holding her father's evidence and standing in the particular posture, who has stopped waiting to feel ready and has decided that ready was going to have to be whatever she was right now. Then let's go, she said. Henry Parker's 12 acres were on the western edge of the valley, far enough from Red Hollow that a man could convince himself he was living outside of Victor Blackwell's shadow. It was a convincing enough illusion, Emily supposed, if you didn't look too carefully at the shape of everything around you. Parker was in his field when they arrived. He was a man somewhere past 60, lean in the way that years of hard physical work and not quite enough food will make a person lean, with hands that had forgotten how to be anything other than calloused, and a face that had settled into the particular expression of someone who had made their peace with disappointment, the way you make your peace with weather. Not accepting it as right, just accepting it as real. He saw them coming, and he didn't stop working. He kept turning soil with a short-handled tool, slow and methodical, row by row, until they were close enough that ignoring required active effort. Then he straightened, and he looked at them, and something moved through his eyes: recognition, then wariness, then the careful blankness of a man deciding how much of himself to reveal. "Miss Carter," he said. He touched the brim of his hat. Then he looked at Caleb. "Don't know you, Caleb Walker," Caleb said. "Heard that name this morning," Parker said. "Heard it from 2 different people before I'd had my coffee." He set his tool against the fence post beside him. "Both of them told me to stay away from you." "Who told you that?" Emily asked. "Does it matter?" Parker said. "It matters. Because if Victor Blackwell's people were here before us this morning," Caleb said, "then they know your name is in the Carter records. Which means you're already in the middle of this, whether you want to be or not." Parker was quiet. He looked out over his 12 acres with the look of a man taking inventory of exactly how much he had to lose, and finding the number simultaneously too large and too small to bear. "I can't help you," he said. "You sold your lower 40 acres in 1,878, Emily said. Not gently, she did not have time for gentle, and she suspected Parker didn't either. The terms of the sale referenced a debt to the Territorial Agricultural Bank. My father documented that the debt amount recorded in the land office was higher than the amount on the original loan. Someone altered those numbers after you signed." Parker's jaw tightened. "You knew," Caleb said quietly, "not an accusation, just a recognition." "I knew something wasn't right," Parker said. "I didn't know the specific mechanism. I knew I signed a paper that said one thing, and the bank said I owed more than that paper said I owed. And by the time I understood the gap between those 2 numbers, the land was already transferred and I had $400 in my pocket and a family to feed." He looked at Emily. $400 was not nothing in 1,878. "I know," Emily said. "It was also not what that land was worth. I know that too." Parker picked up his tool again, held it without using it, turning the handle in his hands the way men turn things when they are thinking and need something to do with their fingers. "I tried to dispute it. You probably know that. 3 years I spent filing claims and sending letters and talking to every official who would give me 5 minutes. Every door I walked up to was closed before I reached it." He looked at Caleb. "What's different now?" "We have the altered records," Caleb said. "We have the original figures. We have a witness who can testify to how the consolidation was managed. We have 7 years of accounting documentation from someone who had direct access to Blackwell's books." He paused. "And we have a circuit judge, Aldous Marsh, who is not connected to Blackwell, and who has jurisdiction over the Territorial Land Office." "Marsh," Parker said. "I know of him. He has a reputation for being thorough." Parker turned the tool handle again, "and for not being particularly impressed by money." "That's consistent with what I know," Caleb said. Parker looked at him for a long moment. "What happened to you?" he said. "Your name." "Heard there was something federal charges." "False charges," Caleb said. "Built by the same network that's been protecting Victor Blackwell for 15 years. I have the evidence to prove it. It's part of the same case." "You're not just here for Emily's father," Parker said. "No," Caleb said, "I'm not." Another silence. The kind that has texture to it, not empty, but full of everything the person is weighing and measuring and deciding. "If I testify," Parker said slowly, "and something goes wrong, if Blackwell's people get to the judge or the filing gets buried or the evidence gets thrown out on some procedural grounds, I don't understand I lose these 12 acres. That's all I have left. Yes, Caleb said. He did not offer reassurance. He did not tell Parker it would all work out. He said yes and let it stand there as the honest thing it was. Parker looked at him like a man who has been lied to, enough times that honesty from a stranger registers as something startling. Why? Parker said. Why are you doing this? You could have filed your own case. You could have done this from Tucson or Phoenix, or anywhere that isn't Victor Blackwell's backyard. Why come here? Because the case is here, Caleb said. The witnesses are here. The land is here. And because I spent 6 years being angry about what was done to me, and I spent 1 year deciding what to do about it, and what I decided was that I wasn't going to do it alone in a lawyer's office in a city somewhere. I was going to come here and do it where the damage was done. He looked at Parker steadily. And because you can't restore something from a distance, you have to go back to the place where it broke. Parker looked down at his 12 acres again. My daughter's family is in Red Hollow, he said. Married a local man 3 years back. They've got a child coming in the spring. He said it like it was a fact connected to everything else he had said, not a non sequitur, and Emily understood that it was, that this was Parker, accounting for all the coordinates of his life at once, the geography of everyone he stood to affect. We don't need your answer today, Emily said. Yes, you do, Parker said. He surprised her. He surprised Caleb too. She could see it in the slight shift of his posture. If Blackwell's people were here this morning, I don't have the luxury of thinking about this slowly. Slow thinking is what he counts on. Slow thinking is what's kept this valley quiet for 15 years. He set the tool down deliberately, like he was setting down something else along with it. What do you need from me, specifically? A written statement, Caleb said. Your account of the sale, the original terms as you understood them, and the discrepancy you identified afterward. Signed and dated. And testimony before the judge if it comes to that. If it comes to that. Parker nodded once. A single definitive motion, the kind a person makes when they have committed to something before they started speaking, and the words are only confirmation. Come inside, he said. I have paper. They spent 40 minutes inside Parker's house, and at the end of it he handed Caleb 4 pages of closely written text in a hand that shook slightly, but did not stop. Emily watched Parker look at what he had written for a long moment before he handed it over. And she understood that look. It was the look of a man holding the last 6 years of his life in document form and releasing it into someone else's hands. Martha Collins told us something, Emily said before they left. About a man named Thomas Reed. Parker's expression shifted. Not closing exactly, but cautious. Reed's on Blackwell's land. I know. Martha said his daughter. Clara, Parker said. She's 8, no 9 now. He folded his arms across his chest. Thomas loves that girl more than he loves breathing. But he's also seen what happens to people who talk. He's not wrong to be afraid. He's not wrong, Caleb agreed. But he might be more wrong to stay quiet. Parker looked at him. You're going to go to him. Yes, be careful how you do it, Parker said. Thomas is the kind of man who digs in deeper when he feels cornered. You push him, he'll shut down entirely and there won't be any getting him back. He paused. Talk to Clara Abbott first, the school teacher. She knows Thomas, and she knows how to reach him in ways that don't make him feel like he's being handled. They rode away from Parker's property with his statement in Caleb's coat pocket and the particular forward momentum that comes when the thing you thought would be the hardest obstacle turns out to be something you could actually move. That went better than I expected, Emily said. Most things go better or worse than expected, Caleb said. Rarely exactly as expected, philosophical, practical. He was quiet for a moment. Parker was ready. He'd been ready for a while. He just needed someone to show up and make the asking specific. Emily thought about that. She thought about her father, who had spent years being careful and building toward a specific moment, and about how waiting for specific had cost him everything. She thought about the difference between being ready and knowing when ready was enough. We need to check the barn again when we get back, she said. The panel I know, Caleb said. And we need to think about whether the documents are safe where they are. They're not, Caleb said. They haven't been safe since Blackwell's man came this morning. We need to move them. He thought for a moment. Martha Collins. Her property is the least obvious location, and she has the temperament too. We can't put more risk on her than she's already taken, Emily said. The risk is already there, Caleb said. What we can do is share it instead of concentrating it. He looked at her. Your father kept everything in one place. That was his vulnerability. We don't have to repeat it. Emily thought of her father's hidden panel, his carefully wrapped oilcloth, 7 years of work stored in a single location, because he was one person acting alone. She thought about the difference between then and now. All right, she said. We move the documents tonight. But first we find Clara Abbott, Caleb said. The Red Hollow schoolhouse sat at the northern edge of town, a single-room building that let out at midday. They arrived at noon, just as the last of the children were filing out into the thin afternoon sun. Clara Abbott was inside stacking papers with the focused efficiency of someone working against a short window of time. She was younger than Emily had expected, mid-30s, with an alert, intelligent face. And the particular quality of attention that good teachers develop, the ability to be aware of everything in a room simultaneously. She saw Emily first and paused. Then she saw Caleb, and her eyes moved back and forth between them with rapid assessment. "I heard about last night," she said. "I hear about most things eventually." "Small town." She set her papers down. "Emily Carter." "I knew your father," Emily said. "He came to me once. About 2 years ago. He wanted to know if there was a way to get records from the land office independently, bypassing Pruitt's office. I told him the only formal route was through the territorial administrator's office in Tucson." She paused. "I don't think he ever went. He seemed like a man who was trying to solve everything himself." "He was," Emily said, and the recognition of it was both tender and painful. "What do you need from me?" "Thomas Reed," Caleb said. Clara Abbott's expression was complicated. She cared about Thomas Reed's daughter. Emily could see it in the way the name registered, not as an abstraction but as a specific small person Clara felt responsible for. She was also clearly afraid for what happened to people who got close to the edges of whatever Victor Blackwell was building. "Thomas won't talk to strangers," Clara said. "And he's scared enough right now that I wouldn't be surprised if he came to pick up Lily from school tomorrow and just kept riding." "Has someone approached him?" Caleb asked. "Someone came to the ranch this morning," Clara said. "One of Blackwell's men. Thomas told me about it when he dropped Lily off. He was shaking." She looked at Caleb directly, not from fear exactly. From the particular kind of terror that comes when you realize you're already involved in something you thought you'd managed to stay out of. "Because his name is in the records," Emily said. "Because his name is in the records," Clara confirmed. "Blackwell's man didn't threaten him directly. He just reminded Thomas that his job, his housing, and his daughter's school enrollment are all contingent on Thomas remaining a cooperative member of the community." She said the last phrase with a flatness that communicated exactly how she felt about it. "School enrollment," Caleb said. "Victor Blackwell donated the land this building sits on," Clara said. "Which means technically, if he chose to exercise that leverage, which he has not yet done but which everyone who works with this school is aware he could, he has the ability to create significant difficulty for families whose children attend." She paused. "He has never used that leverage directly. He doesn't need to. The possibility is enough." "That's sophisticated," Caleb said. Not admiringly, just noting it. "He's had 15 years to build the system," Clara said. "He didn't get to where he is by being crude about it." Emily looked at Clara steadily. "Will you talk to Thomas?" "I've been Thomas Reed's daughter's teacher for 2 years," Clara said. "He trusts me as much as he trusts anyone right now." "Which is not much, but it's something." She folded her hands on her desk. "What would you need him to say?" "He witnessed the Parker contract alteration," Caleb said. Specifically, he was present when Doyle Blackwell's foreman brought revised paperwork to the land office clerk on the same day the original Parker sale was filed. He saw the substitute documents change hands. "My notes from following this case indicate that Reed mentioned it to 2 people at the time, both of whom advised him to forget he'd seen it." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "He never told me that," she said. "He's never spoken a word to me about Blackwell." "I know," Caleb said. "That's what silence costs. He's been carrying that for 6 years." Something shifted in Clara Abbott's expression. Not softening exactly, her face was not the kind that went soft but opening, the way a door opens when someone finds the right key. "Lily asked me last week why her father looks sad all the time," she said. "I told her sometimes grown-ups carry heavy things." She was quiet. "I'll talk to him. Tonight if possible," Caleb said. "I understand," she said. They left the schoolhouse and rode back toward the ranch, and the afternoon was doing what Arizona afternoons did in the fall, burning off the morning gray and going very still and very clear, the kind of clarity that feels like a held breath. They were half a mile from the ranch when Caleb said, "We've got company." Emily looked. 3 horses outside the barn. Men she didn't know standing at the fence. And leaning against the fence post closest to the barn door, arms crossed and looking in no particular hurry, was a man she did recognize. Deputy Cole Mather. He was 35, lean, with the particular negligent authority of a man who has had a badge long enough to confuse it with a personality. He watched them ride up without changing his posture. "Miss Carter," he said when they stopped. "Afternoon, Walker." Deputy, Emily said. Sheriff sent me out to check on things, Mather said. Heard there was some disturbance at the trading hall last night. Wanted to make sure you were doing all right. I'm fine, Emily said. I wasn't the one who tore up documents. Mather smiled without using his eyes. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. There's been a complaint filed this morning. Victor Blackwell is alleging that you made threatening and defamatory statements against him in a public place last night. I made accurate statements, Emily said. Well, Mather said, that's a matter for the court to sort out. In the meantime, the sheriff wants me to remind you that any further public accusations against Mr. Blackwell are protected speech, Caleb said. Mather looked at him. You're not a lawyer, Walker. No. I'm a former federal investigator who spent considerable time understanding exactly what constitutes protected speech under territorial law. And I can tell you with reasonable confidence that a citizen making factual claims about a public figure in a public place falls outside the scope of defamation law as written. He said it without heat, without particular emphasis, in the same level tone he used for everything. You can tell Sheriff Hale that Miss Carter appreciates his concern and will be speaking with a territorial judge about these matters directly. Something moved through Mather's eyes. Quick, controlled, gone in an instant, but Emily caught it. Fear was not quite the right word for it. Calculation was closer. The rapid adjustment of a man who has just realized the situation is more developed than his employer knew when he sent him out here. Judge Marsh, Caleb added, if Hale needs a name. Mather pushed off from the fence post. He straightened his coat, settled his hat, and looked at Emily with the polished pleasantness of someone performing courtesy rather than feeling it. Miss Carter, he said, I strongly encourage you to be careful. You're a young woman alone on an isolated ranch. All sorts of things can go wrong in the territory for people who don't have the right support around them. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned, signaled to the men at the fence, and they walked to their horses and rode out. Emily waited until they were gone. He knows about Marsh, she said. He knows I know about Marsh, Caleb said. He was already dismounting, already moving toward the barn, which means that information gets back to Blackwell in the next hour. He pushed the barn door open and went straight to the hidden panel. Still intact, still closed, he let out a breath. We move everything tonight. To Martha's place. He'll know we've been to Martha's, Emily said. He'll have had someone watching. He'll suspect, Caleb said. He won't know for certain. There's a difference, and the difference matters. He turned to face her. Emily, that man just threatened you directly in front of 2 witnesses, which means Blackwell is moving faster than I expected. What does that tell us? That he's afraid, Caleb said. A man who still felt completely safe would have sent Mather out here to be pleasant and unofficial. He would have waited. The fact that Mather delivered an actual threat means Blackwell is worried enough to be sloppy. He paused. And sloppy men make mistakes we can use. Emily thought about this. She thought about Victor Blackwell sitting in his large corner table last night, absolutely at ease, performing certainty like a man who had been certain so long he'd forgotten it was a performance. She thought about the fraction of a second she'd seen behind his eyes when Caleb stood up. She thought about what it meant that he had sent someone to this barn before she and Caleb had even ridden 9 miles to Martha Collins. He's been afraid since last night, she said slowly. He was afraid the moment you stood up. That's why he moved so fast this morning. He wasn't being strategic, he was being reactive. Caleb looked at her. Yes, he said, that changes things. It changes the timeline, Caleb said. It doesn't change what we need to do. It just means we need to do it faster. The afternoon turned into evening, and as the light went gold and then amber and then started to give way to the long Arizona twilight, they worked. They transferred documents in oilcloth bundles, moving the ledger and the map and the most critical papers to 3 separate locations, the largest portion to Martha Collins, a secondary cache wrapped tight and left with Henry Parker, and a third sealed in a tobacco tin Caleb buried under a loose stone beside the well, noted in a coded list they each memorized and then burned. It was close to 8 o'clock when Clara Abbott came. She arrived on foot, moving quickly, and Emily had the barn door open before Clara had crossed the yard because there was something in the way she was walking that communicated urgency, without being able to contain it. I talked to Thomas, Clara said. She stopped just inside the door. He was in worse shape than I expected. Blackwell's man came back this afternoon. Told Thomas directly that if he spoke to you or Walker, his employment would be terminated immediately, and he would have 30 days to vacate the housing on the ranch property. He threatened his home, Emily said. He threatened his daughter's home, Clara said, which is a different thing, and Blackwell knows it. She paused. But Thomas told me something he's never told anyone. Something he's been carrying since 1878. The barn went very quiet. He wasn't just a witness to the Parker contract alteration, Clara said. He was a witness to something earlier. Something that happened before any of the land transactions, before the Crane deed, before Parker, before any of it. She looked at Caleb. He witnessed a meeting between Victor Blackwell and Raymond Blackwell in the summer of 1876. In the Red Hollow Trading Hall, before it was the trading hall, when it was still a private warehouse Blackwell leased. He was 17 years old, and he was sweeping the back rooms, and they didn't know he was there. Caleb went completely still. Thomas Reed witnessed the original planning meeting, he said. He heard them discuss the strategy, Clara said. How they would use the Agricultural Bank's record system, which clerk they had already paid to alter documents on demand. How they would identify which landowners had debts they could manipulate. He heard the whole architecture of it laid out in a single conversation. She paused. He was 17 years old and he was terrified, and he has never spoken a word of it to anyone for 19 years. Emily looked at Caleb. The weight of what Clara had just said moved through the room like a change in air pressure, that sensation of something enormous shifting, the kind that makes you reach for solid ground without knowing why. He's the witness to the origin, Emily said, not just one transaction. The entire design of it. If he testifies, Caleb said carefully, he doesn't just corroborate the records. He explains them. He explains why the records look the way they do and what the intention behind them was from the very beginning. He looked at Clara. Is he willing? He said no, Clara said. He said absolutely not. He has a daughter and he has nothing else, and he won't risk the one thing he has left. Emily felt the hope that had been building all day contract slightly. But Clara said. They both looked at her. He said no tonight, Clara said. He said no, and then he sat at his kitchen table for a long time without speaking. And then he looked at me, and he said something I've been thinking about on the whole walk here. She paused. He said, what kind of world am I keeping her safe for? If I keep her safe in a world like this. No one spoke. He hasn't said yes, Clara said clearly. I need you to understand that. He is frightened and he is not certain, and he may still say no tomorrow. But he didn't say never. He said he needed to think. She looked at Emily directly. He asked me one question before I left. He asked whether there was actually a chance this works. Not a hope. Not a possibility, an actual chance. Emily looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Emily. Between them passed a communication that required no words and accounting of everything they had gathered in the last 36 hours. The map and the ledger and Parker's statement and Martha's notation and the name Horace Lund in a notebook in Tucson and the name Judge Aldous Marsh in 5 weeks on the territorial calendar. Tell him yes, Emily said. Tell him there is an actual chance. Clara nodded. She turned to go and then stopped. One more thing, she said. Thomas told me that Blackwell's man, the one who came this afternoon, he wasn't Doyle. It was someone else, someone Thomas had never seen before. She paused. He said the man had the look of someone who traveled a long way to be there. Someone brought in from outside the valley. The air in the barn changed again. Blackwell is bringing in people from outside, Caleb said after Clara had gone. Because he doesn't trust his own people to handle this, Emily said. Because his own people saw you stand up last night, and he doesn't know how far that spreads. Which means he's more afraid than even the afternoon threat suggested, Caleb said. And it means whoever he brought in is not here to deliver polite warnings. He looked at Emily with the particular honesty she had come to understand as the specific form his care took, not reassurance, not softening, but the truth stated clearly so she could use it. We're running out of time, he said. How long do we actually have? Emily said. He thought about it. Genuinely thought, not performing confidence or manufacturing hope. The filing deadline for this circuit session is in 4 weeks, he said. If we don't have everything to Marsh's clerk by then, we wait 3 more months. And 3 months is not a window we have. 4 weeks, Emily said. Realistically, Caleb said we need to be in Tucson in 10 days. That means Horace Lund in 3 days. Thomas Reed's decision in 2. Every additional statement, from every additional witness, by the end of this week. Emily stood in her father's barn, in the lantern light, in the place where he had hidden 7 years of truth because he ran out of time to use it. She thought about what it meant to run out of time. She thought about what it meant not to. Tomorrow, she said, we ride to Tucson. Caleb looked at her. That's faster than if Lund is alive and he has what I think he has. We need him first, Emily said. Everything else builds from the foundation. You said it yourself. The Crane transaction is the origin. Lund is the witness to the origin. Without him, we have a strong case. With him we have an airtight one. She paused. And I want airtight. Tucson is 2 days' ride, Caleb said. Then we leave at first light, Emily said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she had not seen him do before, not the almost smile of the night before, not the careful neutral expression he wore like armor. He smiled. A real one, small and tired and real. Your father, he said, would have liked this version of you. Emily felt that land somewhere deep in her chest. She held it there for a moment, not speaking, because some things deserve the space you give them. He would have liked you too, she said finally. He had a particular appreciation for stubborn, inconvenient men who refuse to let go of the truth. Is that what I am? That's exactly what you are, Emily said. Get some sleep, Caleb. First light comes early. But neither of them slept much. Because somewhere in Red Hollow, in the large corner table of the trading hall, Victor Blackwell was making plans. And the men he had brought in from outside the valley were already in town, already watching. Already waiting for the moment when a grieving woman and a disgraced investigator made the one mistake that would let him close every door in front of them for good. And because Caleb Walker had not told Emily the one thing he had not yet told anyone, the thing he had found 3 weeks ago in a land office filing in Tucson that changed the shape of everything he thought he understood about this case, and that he had been carrying since then like a stone in his chest, waiting for the right moment to set it down. He had not found that moment yet. But the road to Tucson was 2 days long, and some things he was learning could not wait forever. They left before the sun came up. Emily had packed light the things that mattered, the things that couldn't be replaced. A change of clothes, her father's address book, the coded list she and Caleb had memorized and burned, and the tobacco tin copy of the most critical 2 pages from the ledger, which she carried inside her coat against her ribs like a second heartbeat. Everything else was distributed. Everything else was as safe as they could make it. Caleb was waiting at the fence, with both horses ready when she came out of the house. He looked like a man who had not slept, which was accurate, and like a man who had made peace with not sleeping, which was also accurate. He handed her the roan's reins without comment, and they rode out before the valley had fully registered that the day had started. The first hour was quiet. The kind of quiet that belongs to early morning in open country, not empty but settled, the world still in the process of deciding what kind of day it was going to be. Emily rode with the particularity of someone whose body was moving on its own, while her mind was somewhere else entirely, turning over the same questions she had been turning over since the night before. Caleb had said there was something he hadn't told her. He had not said it directly. He had implied it in the way careful, honest people imply things, not through evasion, but through the specific weight of certain silences, the way certain topics sat slightly heavier in the air than the conversation around them. She had noticed it the night before, and she had let it rest because pressing a man who is still deciding how to say something is rarely productive. But they had 2 days of riding ahead of them. She waited until they were clear of the valley's western edge, until the land opened up and Red Hollow was a memory behind them, and then she said, "What haven't you told me?" Caleb rode for a long moment without answering. She had expected this. She let the silence have its space. 3 weeks ago, he said, I was in Tucson following up on the Crane deed documentation. I went to the Territorial Records Office, not Pruitt's office, the primary archive on the south side of the building. I was looking for the original survey records from the 1875 Crane property. He paused. I found what I was looking for, and while I was there, I found something else. What? Emily said. A deed of trust, Caleb said, filed in the autumn of 1882. It's a financial instrument, a way of securing a debt against a property without immediately transferring ownership. The property listed in the deed of trust is the Carter Ranch. Emily felt the sentence arrive and sat with it for a moment before responding. My father's ranch, she said. The deed was filed against the ranch to secure a debt of $2,000, Caleb said. The debt is listed as owed to a private lending entity called the Arizona Valley Development Company. He looked at her. Emily, the Arizona Valley Development Company doesn't exist as a registered entity. I checked. It has no territorial filing, no incorporation record, no address beyond a post office box in Tucson that was opened and closed in the same calendar year. The morning air moved around them, cool and still. Someone filed a fraudulent debt against my father's ranch, Emily said. Against your ranch now, Caleb said. Your father is gone and the debt attaches to the property regardless of ownership. Whoever holds that deed of trust has the legal standing to initiate foreclosure proceedings if the debt remains unpaid. He paused. The $2,000 amount is not arbitrary. I looked at comparable property valuations for the Carter Ranch based on current land office records. $2,000 is almost exactly the value of the eastern water access, the strip of land that runs along the river boundary. Everything clicked into place with the horrible precision of something that had been designed to work exactly this way. He doesn't need to buy it, Emily said. He filed a debt against it. He'll foreclose. He was going to wait until after your father was gone, Caleb said. He needed the property to pass out of your father's hands first, so the dispute would be with someone younger, more isolated, with less institutional knowledge of the records. He stopped. He needed my father to die, Emily said. The words were flat and certain and terrible. Yes, Caleb said. They rode in silence for a long stretch. The terrain was changing around them, the valley's flat floor giving way to the longer rolls and rocky outcroppings of the land between Red Hollow and the road to Tucson. A hawk worked the air above them, patient and unhurried, conducting its own business entirely indifferent to theirs. Why didn't you tell me before we left? Emily said. Because I wanted to know whether we had a case first, Caleb said. A deed of trust is a serious legal instrument. Fighting it requires either proof of fraud or the ability to pay the debt. We don't have $2,000, and until yesterday we didn't have enough evidence to prove fraud convincingly. Now he reached inside his coat and produced a folded paper. I have a copy of the deed. I've been carrying it for 3 weeks. I copied it from the original in the archive, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you since I arrived in Red Hollow. Emily took the paper. She did not open it. She held it. The Arizona Valley Development Company, she said. If it has no real filing, someone created it purely to hold this instrument. Someone with access to the Territorial Records Office. Gerald Pruitt, Caleb said. Can you prove that? I can connect Pruitt to the post office box. I have a record of him signing for correspondence at that address in the spring of 1882, 6 months before the deed was filed. It's not a direct link to the company, but combined with everything else we have on Pruitt, it builds a pattern. He paused. Emily, this is actually the most important thing we're carrying into Tucson. Not the ledger, not the map. This deed is the mechanism Blackwell planned to use to take your land legally. If we can prove it's fraudulent, we don't just expose what he's done to other people. We stop what he's actively trying to do to you right now. And if we can't prove it in time, she said. The deed of trust allows 60 days from notification before foreclosure proceedings can begin, Caleb said. You haven't been formally notified yet, which means the clock hasn't started. But Blackwell knows we're moving, and he's moving too. The notification could arrive any day. Emily opened the paper. She read it carefully. She read it the way her father had taught her to read contracts, not for what they said on the surface, but for the specific language choices, the weight of particular words, the things that were and weren't present. Her father had said once that a dishonest document always told you something about the person who wrote it if you knew what to look for. The language here, she said. In the description of the lending entity, it says the company, duly organized under the laws of the territory of Arizona. But if there's no territorial filing, that clause is false on its face, Caleb said. If Martha Collins can testify that no such company exists in the land records, which she can, because she was managing those records in 882, then the instrument is void. A fraudulent instrument cannot sustain a foreclosure action. Emily folded the paper and put it inside her coat. You've been carrying this for 3 weeks, she said. Yes. Why? She said, not accusing. Genuinely asking. Caleb was quiet for a moment. The road stretched ahead of them, dusty and direct. Because I've been working alone for 9 months, he said. And I know how to do that. I don't know how to do this. He said it without self-pity, without drama. Just the plain fact of it. I don't know how to walk up to a woman who just buried her father and say your land is being stolen too. The documents are already filed. The mechanism is already in place. I couldn't figure out how to do that without it sounding like I was delivering a verdict instead of asking for her help. Emily looked at him sideways. We're going to have to work on that, she said. He glanced at her. Work on what? On you telling me things when they happen, instead of carrying them alone until you've figured out the perfect way to say them. She looked back at the road. I am not delicate, Caleb. I don't need things presented to me at the right angle. I need to know what's real so I can deal with what's real. He was quiet for a moment. Understood, he said. Good. She pulled her coat tighter against the morning chill. Now, tell me everything you know about Horace Lund. Horace Lund turned out to be alive. He was 71 years old, which was older than Emily had allowed herself to hope, and he lived in a narrow house in the eastern district of Tucson, with a garden in front. and a temperament that greets strangers the way a man greets weather, not hostile, not welcoming, simply acknowledging the reality of their presence and waiting to see what they intended. He opened the door before they could knock. He had heard the horses. "You're the Carter girl," he said to Emily, looking at her with the particular acuity of old men who have spent years learning to read faces quickly. "You look like your father." Emily's breath caught. "You knew him," she said. "He came here 4 months ago," Lund said. "Sat in that chair right there and showed me your grandfather's Bible and a ledger that went back to 1875. He stepped aside from the door. "Come in." Inside, over coffee that Lund produced from a pot that had clearly been keeping warm for some time, as though he had been expecting company, they sat across from an old man who had been carrying a secret for 19 years and had the particulars settled. Quality of someone who has been waiting for permission to put it down. "I was at the Crane signing," Lund said. He said it, without preamble, with the directness of someone who has rehearsed this particular sentence in his head enough times that the rehearsing is over and only the saying remains. September 1876. "I was a surveyor. Elias Crane hired me to survey and certify the boundaries of his land before he signed anything. I was there when he put his name to the deed." Wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "And I was there 2 weeks later when a man I didn't know came to my office and asked me to change my survey report to reflect a different acreage figure." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "He asked you to alter the official survey," he said. "He asked me to make the property appear less valuable than it was," Lund said. "If the survey showed lower acreage, the assessed value dropped, and the debt that the agricultural bank had claimed Crane owed would represent a larger fraction of that value. It changed the math on whether the forced sale was legitimate under territorial law." He paused. "I refused." "What happened?" "2 things," Lund said. "First, my survey certificate disappeared from the county records office. When Crane tried to dispute the sale, there was no independent survey on file. The only valuation was the bank's internal assessment, which aligned with Blackwell's numbers." He looked at his coffee. "Second, I received a visit from a man who told me that if I filed a second survey or spoke publicly about the first one, my license to practice would be challenged on the grounds of professional misconduct." "Raymond Blackwell," Caleb said. Lund looked at him sharply. "You know that name." "Raymond Blackwell destroyed my federal career," Caleb said. "I've been building this case for 9 months. Raymond is the network. Victor is the local operation." Lund set his cup down slowly. He looked at Caleb the way a man looks at something he has been trying to understand for a long time and has just been given the final piece of. "Raymond never came to me directly," he said. "He sent a man named Pruitt, Gerald Pruitt. He was young, a junior clerk. He delivered the threat and he picked up the survey certificate. And he told me, with extraordinary politeness, that my cooperation was appreciated and my continued silence would be rewarded." He paused. "I was 52 years old. I had a practice and a family, and I made the decision that I am not proud of." "You stayed quiet," Emily said. "I stayed quiet," Lund agreed. "For 19 years. And in those 19 years, I watched Victor Blackwell acquire half a valley, one stolen parcel at a time, and I told myself the reason I was silent was that I had nothing left, no certificate, no corroboration. Nothing but my word against a man who owned everything in a 3-county radius." He looked at Emily directly. "Then your father came." Emily was very still. "He came to you," she said. "He came with the ledger," Lund said. "He came with the accounting records that showed the discrepancy from the bank debt side. He showed me that what Pruitt had done to my survey was part of a larger pattern, that my missing certificate wasn't an isolated act of intimidation. It was part of a system, part of a designed mechanism." He paused. "He told me that what I remembered, what I had seen, was the original link in a chain that connected everything else. He told me that my testimony wasn't just corroboration. It was the explanation. And he asked you to testify," Caleb said. "He asked me to be willing to testify," Lund said. "When the time was right. When the case was built enough to stand on without me, so that I wasn't the only support." He looked from Caleb to Emily. He was worried about my age. He was worried that if I was the only thing holding the case together and something happened to me. He stopped. "He was protecting you," Emily said. "He was being practical," Lund said. "Your father was a practical man." He paused. "He also said something I've thought about every day since he left. He said that the truth doesn't expire, that it waits for the moment when someone is ready to carry it." He said. Lund's voice shifted slightly. Not breaking but changing register. He said he hoped he would be the one to carry it into court himself, but that if he wasn't, he had made sure someone else would know where to find it. He looked at Emily. He meant you. The room was very quiet. Emily looked at her hands in her lap. She breathed slowly, steadily, the way she had taught herself to breathe over the last week, not pushing down what she felt, but not letting it overflow either, keeping it moving, keeping herself moving. He knew, she said. He knew it might not be him. He knew the risk he was carrying, Lund said gently. He came to me 4 months ago, which means he was assembling the final pieces. He was getting ready. He paused. I'm sorry he didn't get to finish it himself. Emily nodded once, the kind of nod that contains a great deal and releases none of it. Mr. Lund. Caleb said, will you testify? I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question for 4 months, Lund said. He straightened in his chair. Yes, without reservation. Whatever you need, written statement, sworn testimony before the judge, a signed account of every conversation with Pruitt. Whatever is required. I am 71 years old, and I have been quiet about this for 19 years, and I am not going to die having said nothing. The weight that lifted from the room in that moment was something Emily felt physically, a loosening in her chest that she had not known was constricted, until it wasn't. Judge Aldous Marsh, Caleb said. Do you know him? I know of him, Lund said. He has a reputation for being thorough, Emily said. We keep hearing that, and incorruptible, Lund added, which is the more relevant quality in this particular circumstance. He pushed himself up from his chair with the careful effort of a man who has learned to respect the requirements of his body. I'll need a day to gather my records. I have copies of everything, the original survey specifications, the correspondence from Pruitt, the survey certificate itself. He stopped. I kept a copy. Pruitt took the original from the county records, but I kept a working copy at my home office. I don't think he knew I had it. Caleb went very still. You have the original survey certificate, he said. A copy of it, Lund said. Certified by my own hand on the same day the original was filed. Under territorial law, a surveyor's personal copy carries the same legal weight as the filed original if the filed original cannot be located. He looked at Caleb calmly. I know it does. I looked it up. About 18 years ago. Just in case. Caleb looked at Emily. Emily looked at Caleb. And between them passed the particular wordless understanding of two people who have been building something difficult and have just discovered that one of the critical missing pieces has been sitting in a house in Tucson for 19 years, waiting in a desk drawer, patient as stone. We need to go to the Territorial Records Office, asked Wolfnoon, Caleb said. Before we do anything else. What for? Emily said. The deed of trust against your ranch, Caleb said. If we can file a formal contest of the instrument before the formal notification is issued to you, we may be able to prevent the clock from starting on the foreclosure window. He looked at Lund. Is there a territorial law clerk you trust in this city? Someone Pruitt doesn't have influence over. Lund thought about it. James Whitfield, he said. He's been the primary clerk in the Civil Records Division for 6 years. He and Pruitt have had a professional dispute running for the last 3. Something about filing protocols that became personal. He has no love for Pruitt and no obligation to Blackwell. He paused. He also happens to be meticulous to a degree that some people find off-putting. Which means he's exactly who you want, looking at a fraudulent instrument. Can you get us a meeting with him today? Caleb said. I can do better than that, Lund said. He lives 2 streets over. We went to school together. Come back in an hour. They left Lund's house and walked because both horses needed water and rest, and so, truthfully, did they. Emily found a bench in a small public square a block from Lund Street and sat down and looked at the city moving around, her people going about the ordinary business of their ordinary days, unaware of any of it, unaware that somewhere in the Territorial Records Office a fraudulent document was waiting to take her home, and that in a narrow house nearby an old man was putting on his coat to go ask his schoolfriend for a meeting. Caleb sat beside her. Your father built this, he said. Not just the ledger, not just the map. He built the network of people who could testify. Lund Martha Collins, the notation in the address book, the hidden cache. He paused. He built everything except the final step, and he built it in a way that meant someone else could finish it. He built it for me, Emily said. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. He should have told me. He should have. She stopped. Start again. I understand why he didn't. I understand he was trying to protect me. But I spent years watching him carry something heavy and not understanding what it was. And I could have helped. I could have helped him carry it. I know, Caleb said. And now I'm carrying it alone. No, Caleb said. You're not. She looked at him. He was looking straight ahead, not at her, his jaw set and his profile in the afternoon light, carrying the particular quality of a man who has said something that cost him something to say and is not taking it back. You're not alone, he said again. Quieter this time. Just for her. Emily looked back at the square. She let the words settle in the particular place where true things go when you're not ready to look at them directly, but you know they're there. Tell me something, she said. The false charges against you. When Raymond Blackwell destroyed your career, what did you lose besides the badge? He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. I had a partner, he said, another investigator. We'd worked together for 3 years. When the charges came, he was given a choice: distance himself from me or face secondary accusations of complicity. He paused. He distanced himself. I'm sorry, Emily said. He had a family, Caleb said. I understood it. I even understood it at the time, which made it worse, because being able to understand why a person does something that destroys you doesn't make the destruction feel less real. He paused. I spent a long time after that working alone, specifically because it was easier. Nobody to trust, nobody to lose, nobody whose choice could unmake you. And now, Emily said. He turned to look at her. The afternoon light was on his face, and she could see everything he usually kept below the surface: the tiredness and the decade of isolation, and the particular quality of a man who has been alone so long that not being alone feels like something he has to consciously remember how to do. Now I'm trying to remember how to work with someone, he said, and doing a mediocre job of it by my own estimation. You stood up, Emily said. In a room full of 40 men, you stood up. That's not nothing, Caleb. You walked in, he said. That's not nothing either. The bench between them was very quiet. Then Emily said, when we get back to Red Hollow, whatever is waiting for us there, whatever Blackwell has done, in the days we've been gone, we go together. No more carrying things separately. Agreed, he said. And you tell me things when they happen. I'm working on it. Work faster, she said, and it was said with enough lightness that he almost smiled, and enough seriousness that he heard both things in it. James Whitfield was everything Lund had promised: meticulous, precise, and possessed of a professional antagonism toward Gerald Pruitt that he channeled into an extraordinary quality of attention when Caleb laid the copy of the deed of trust on his desk and explained what they believed it was. Whitfield read it 3 times, then he read it a 4th time. Then he looked up. The company name, he said, Arizona Valley Development Company. No territorial filing, Caleb said. No incorporation record. I know, Whitfield said, because I would have processed the filing. He looked at them over the document with the particular expression of a man whose professional domain has been violated and who is finding the experience clarifying. This instrument claims to be issued by a duly organized territorial entity. If that entity has no filing, this claim is fraudulent on its face, which means the instrument is void. Can you put that in writing? Caleb said. I can do substantially more than that, Whitfield said. I can flag the instrument in the official registry as contested pending investigation, which legally prevents it from being used to initiate foreclosure proceedings until the contest is resolved. He set the document down. What else do you have? They spent 4 hours in Whitfield's office. 4 hours of him reading documents and asking sharp, specific questions and making careful notes. His handwriting of a man who has never in his professional life been willing to make a record that couldn't be defended. He read the copy of Martha Collins's notation. He read Parker's statement. He listened to Caleb's account of the 9-month investigation. He looked at the coded summary Emily had reconstructed from memory of her father's ledger. And then he looked at them both and said, "You need Judge Marsh." "We know," Caleb said. "He comes through in 4 weeks. We know that too." "He won't need 4 weeks to read what you have," Whitfield said. "If you can get a preliminary filing to his clerk within the week, he can review it on the road and arrive in Tucson ready to act." He paused. "His clerk's name is Daniel Reeves. He's in Phoenix. I can send a telegraph today if you want to notify him that a filing is coming." "Please," Emily said. Whitfield looked at her. It was a long look, not unkind, the look of a man who has spent a career dealing with documents and has just been reminded that documents are always about people. "Your father," he said. "William Carter. He filed a query with this office about 18 months ago regarding land records access." Emily stared at him. "You knew my father?" "I processed his query," Whitfield said. "I sent him a response explaining the formal channels. I didn't know what he was building. If I had..." He stopped. "I would have told him to come directly to me." "He didn't know who to trust," Emily said. "Most people in this valley don't," Whitfield said. "That is what 15 years of a man like Victor Blackwell does to a community. It teaches people that trust is a vulnerability, that the safest position is alone." He picked up his pen, which is why cases like this one are difficult to build, and why, when they are built, they matter. He looked at Caleb. "I'll file the contest notice this afternoon. I'll send the telegraph to Reeves. And I'll have a formal statement of my findings on the deed of trust ready for your filing package within 24 hours. We may need to leave tomorrow, Caleb said. Then come back in the morning, Whitfield said. It'll be ready. They left the records office in the early evening with the particular sensation of forward motion that comes when the pieces of something that has been abstract suddenly become concrete and official and real. The filing was real. The contest notice was real. Whitfield's statement was real. Lund's testimony would be real. They ate at a small establishment near the square, and Emily was quiet through most of it, and Caleb understood that the quiet was not emptiness, but fullness, the kind that needs time to settle before it can be put into words. It was over dessert, which neither of them particularly ate, that Emily said, "Thomas Reed." Caleb looked up. "We've been gone 2 days," Emily said. Clara Abbott was going to talk to him. He was going to think about it. She was looking at the table, turning her fork in her hand. "If Blackwell's people have been back to his property while we've been here, we can't control what's happening in Red Hollow right now," Caleb said. "I know," Emily said, "but Thomas Reed is the witness to the origin. You said it yourself. With Lund, we have the original transaction documented from the outside. With Reed, we have someone who witnessed the intention, the plan, before anything was even done. Those are two different things." "They are," Caleb agreed. "Without Reed, we have a case," Emily said. "With Reed, we have something a judge doesn't have to work to believe. We have someone who was there at the beginning and can say this is not an accident, this is not a series of unfortunate mistakes, this is a designed system with a designed purpose." She set her fork down. "We need him. He's not ready," Caleb said. "He might be," Emily said. "A man asking what kind of world am I keeping her safe for is not a man who has decided to stay quiet. That's a man who is in the middle of deciding to speak. Or a man who asks the question and talks himself back into silence because the answer is too frightening," Caleb said. He said it honestly, not harshly. "I've seen it before. People get to the edge of courage, and they look over it, and they step back." "He might," Emily agreed. "But we won't know until we're back in Red Hollow." She looked at him. "And we won't be back in Red Hollow until tomorrow evening. Which is why we need to leave at first light again," Caleb said. "Yes." Emily was quiet for a moment, then she said, "What happens if we go back and the ranch has been touched? If Blackwell's men went back while we were gone?" "The documents are distributed," Caleb said. "There's nothing at the ranch to find that would hurt us." "I'm not talking about the documents," Emily said. He looked at her. She looked back at him steadily. "I'm talking about the ranch itself," she said. "If he decides that the fastest way to end this is to create a reason for me not to be there, an accident, a fire, something that looks like ordinary misfortune." "It won't come to that," Caleb said. "Caleb," Emily said. "Tell me things when they happen, remember?" He was quiet for a moment. "It might come to that," he said, "if he's desperate enough and scared enough and running out of time. Men like Victor Blackwell don't let go of something this size without exhausting every option." He met her eyes. "Which is why we go back tomorrow, and we don't go back quietly. We go back with Lund's statement and Whitfield's findings and Parker's testimony and everything we have, and we make sure people in Red Hollow know we were in Tucson and what we did there." "Visible," Emily said. "Dangerous men don't destroy visible things," Caleb said. "Or they do, but the cost is higher. We make the cost as high as possible." Emily nodded. "Then tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he agreed. They sat for another hour, not talking much, which was comfortable in the way that silence between two people becomes comfortable once they have stopped performing ease for each other, and can simply be present without the effort of it. Emily drank her coffee. Caleb looked at the street. Outside, Tucson went about its business, in the particular way of a growing territorial city, loud and confident and entirely indifferent to what was happening in a small valley 2 days to the north. She thought about her father coming here 4 months ago, sitting across from Horace Lund, getting the last piece of the foundation he needed, riding back to Red Hollow with something like hope, the careful, specific hope of a man who knows the difference between wishing and building, and has been doing the latter long enough to see it start to stand. He had not told her. He had been trying to protect her, and she understood that, and she would spend a long time being sad about it, in ways she did not yet have words for. But sitting here in this city where his work had found its last witness, where his documents had found a clerk willing to contest the instrument designed to steal his land, where his daughter had ridden 2 days to finish what he started, she felt something shift in the grief that had been her constant companion since the morning she found the pine box. It was not gone, it would not be gone for a long time, but it had moved from something that sat on top of everything to something that ran underneath it, still present, still real, but no longer between her and the thing she needed to do. She could carry the grief and keep moving. She had been doing it. She was still doing it. Her father's daughter, in a city 2 days from home, with the beginning of justice folded into her coat pocket. She looked at Caleb across the table. He was looking at her. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up. In the trading hall. When you didn't have to, and when everyone else decided they did not." He held her gaze for a moment. "You walked in with a pine box and told the truth to a man who had every advantage over you," he said. "I just stood up. That's all it took," she said. He looked at her with the particular expression of a man who is learning something he should have known earlier and is finding the knowledge both simple and significant. "Yes," he said, "I suppose it was." The morning came cold and clear, and Horace Lund was already awake when they knocked, already dressed, already holding a leather satchel that he carried with the carefulness of a man who has been waiting 19 years to hand something over and does not intend to drop it now. Inside the satchel was his written statement, 12 pages, meticulously organized, covering the original survey, the conversation with Pruitt, the disappearance of the certificate, and 19 years of professional record-keeping that had, without his entirely intending it, produced a secondary archive of everything Pruitt had ever asked him to falsify or ignore. He had said no every time, and he had written down every ask. 12 pages of documented requests from a man who worked for Victor Blackwell's network, spanning 19 years. Emily held the satchel and felt its weight. "Is there anything else?" she asked. "One thing," Lund said. He reached into his coat and produced a sealed envelope. "When your father left here 4 months ago, he gave me this. He said to give it to the person who came to finish what he started. He said I would know who that was when they arrived." He looked at Emily. "I knew when you knocked on my door." Emily took the envelope. Her father's handwriting on the front. Her name. Just that, her name. In his careful, precise hand. The same hand that had filled ledger after ledger with the quiet, determined work of a man who believed the truth was worth protecting. She could not open it here. Not yet. Not on this doorstep with Caleb beside her, and Lund watching and the whole weight of the next 2 days pressing forward. She put it inside her coat, next to the tobacco tin and the contest notice and the folded copy of the fraudulent deed, and she pressed her hand flat against her chest for just a moment, feeling all of it, the evidence and the letter and the specific gravity of everything she was carrying back toward Red Hollow. "Mr. Lund," she said, "will send word when the filing is confirmed. Marsh's clerk will need your sworn statement before the hearing." "I'll be ready," Lund said. "I've been ready for 19 years. They rode out of Tucson in the early morning light, heading north, back toward the valley, and whatever was waiting for them there. And Emily rode with her hand occasionally moving to press against her coat, feeling the envelope beneath it. Her father's last words to her. She would read them when they were home. She would read them when this was done. She would read them when she could hold them, without the whole shape of everything he had to do pressing in around the edges. Not yet, but soon. And beside her, Caleb Walker rode north without speaking, because he had understood since the moment he saw her take the envelope that some things needed to travel in silence, and he was learning, slowly and with genuine effort, that being present for someone did not always mean filling the space between you. Sometimes it meant simply being there, riding in the same direction, toward the same thing. 2 days north, Red Hollow was waiting, and so was Victor Blackwell. And so, perhaps, was Thomas Reed sitting at his kitchen table in the house that wasn't really his, looking at his daughter across the breakfast dishes, asking himself a question that had no safe answer and knowing, somewhere below the fear, that a question with no safe answer still had a right one. They rode back into the valley on the evening of the second day, and Red Hollow looked the same as it always had, the same buildings, the same dust, the same particular quality of quiet that a small town produces at the end of a working day. But Emily had been gone long enough now to see it differently, the way you see a place differently, after you have been away and come back carrying something new. She saw the trading hall where she had stood with the pine box. She saw the schoolhouse where Clara Abbott taught Thomas Reed's daughter. She saw the road that led north to Martha Collins and west to Henry Parker and east, further than she could see from here, to the land that Victor Blackwell had been systematically consuming for 15 years. And she saw, parked outside the sheriff's office, a horse she did not recognize, a large, well-fed animal with expensive tack, the kind of horse that belongs to someone who has traveled a significant distance and expects to be taken seriously when they arrive. Caleb saw it too. "That's not a local horse," he said. No, Emily agreed. They did not stop. They rode through town and out to the Carter Ranch, and when they arrived, Clara Abbott was sitting on the front step of the house in the fading light, and she stood when she saw them coming with the particular urgency of someone who has been waiting and has too much to say to bother with a greeting. Thomas Reed came to me yesterday morning, Clara said, before they had fully dismounted. He came to the schoolhouse before I'd unlocked the door. He'd been awake all night. She looked at Emily. He said yes. Emily stood with her horse's reins in her hand and absorbed that. He said yes, she repeated. He said he thought about what you asked him to think about, Clara said. He said he thought about Lily asking him why he always looks sad. He said. She paused, collecting the words carefully. He said he'd spent 19 years making himself smaller so Victor Blackwell wouldn't notice him, and all that time he'd been shrinking, he'd told himself he was protecting his daughter. But somewhere last week he realized he wasn't protecting her future. He was just protecting his fear. She looked at Caleb. He wants to give a statement, written and sworn. He'll testify in person if it comes to a hearing. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Where is he now? At the ranch, Clara said. He went back to finish out his shift, because leaving without notice would trigger immediate eviction, and he needed one more day to arrange housing. He's moving Lily to his brother's property on the north side tonight. She paused. He said to tell you he's ready when you are. Tomorrow morning, Caleb said. First thing. There's something else, Clara said. Her voice shifted. That horse in front of the sheriff's office. The man it belongs to arrived yesterday afternoon. He's been meeting with Sheriff Hale and Deputy Mather, and he sent word to Victor Blackwell's ranch within an hour of arriving. She folded her arms across her chest. His name is Franklin Cross. He's an attorney from Phoenix. Caleb and Emily looked at each other. Blackwell hired a lawyer, Emily said. Not just any lawyer, Clara said. Cross has a reputation for challenging land claims and evidence filings on procedural grounds. He has overturned 3 territorial land cases in the last 2 years, not because the evidence was insufficient, but because the filing procedures had errors he could exploit. She paused. He's very good at what he does. He's here to find holes in our filing, Caleb said. He's here to prevent a filing from happening, Clara corrected. He arrived before you got back. Blackwell may not know yet that you went to Tucson, but he sent Cross here to make sure that whatever you're building, it doesn't reach a judge intact. Emily thought about Whitfield's office. The contest notice already filed. The telegraph already sent to Judge Marsh's clerk in Phoenix. The proceedings already officially in motion. It may be too late for that, she said. She looked at Caleb. He looked at her. How fast can Cross move, she asked. Fast, Caleb said. If he files a motion challenging the legitimacy of our evidence gathering, it could create a procedural delay that pushes us past the filing deadline for this circuit session. He was thinking out loud. She could hear it in his voice, the particular rapid quality of a mind working through implications. He'll look for anything. Improperly witnessed statements, chain of custody issues with the documents, questions about my standing to gather federal adjacent evidence given the status of my former credentials. Your credentials, Emily said. The false charges were never formally vacated, Caleb said. I've been building toward vacating them as part of this case. But until the case is adjudicated, Cross could argue that any evidence I gathered is tainted by my compromised professional standing. Can he make that argument stick? Before Marsh? Probably not. Marsh is thorough. He'll look at the substance, not just the procedure. He paused. But Cross doesn't need to win the argument permanently. He just needs to delay it long enough. The 3 of them stood in the gathering dark, and Emily felt the shape of what Blackwell had done, not panicking, not fleeing, not trying to destroy the evidence directly. Hiring the most sophisticated procedural lawyer he could find and deploying him before the filing was complete. It was, she thought, exactly the kind of move a man made when he finally understood that the threat was real and the old methods weren't going to work. We file everything we have tomorrow, Emily said. Everything, not piece by piece. All of it at once. With every signature, every sworn statement, every supporting document, in the correct order, in the correct format. She looked at Caleb. What does our filing need to be unassailable? Thomas Reed's statement, Caleb said immediately. Lund's statement is strong, but it's corroboration of the original transaction. Reed is the witness to the intention. Cross will look for the gap between documented fraud and provable criminal intent. Reed closes that gap, he thought. And we need the statements properly notarized, all of them. Parker's, Martha's, Lund's. There's a notary in Red Hollow, Clara said. George Hadley. He's been here for 20 years, and he has no connection to Blackwell. His practice is entirely wills and property transfers, and he has a professional code about neutrality that he treats like a personal religion. Can you reach him tonight? Caleb said. I can reach him in 20 minutes, Clara said. Do it, Emily said. Tell him we need notarization services tomorrow morning early, and that the matter is urgent and official. She looked at Caleb. And we need Martha Collins here tomorrow. And Parker. I'll ride to Martha's tonight, Caleb said. I'll send word to Parker, Clara said. His neighbor's boy is fast. He can be there in 40 minutes. They were moving now with the particular efficiency of people who have stopped managing fear and started managing time. And the difference between those two things was everything the difference between reactive and deliberate, between waiting and building. One more thing, Emily said, the letter. Clara and Caleb both looked at her. She reached inside her coat and produced the envelope. Her father's handwriting, her name. Lund gave me this before we left Tucson, she said. My father wrote it 4 months ago and left it with Lund in case someone came to finish the case after him. She held it in both hands. I haven't opened it yet. The yard was quiet. You don't have to open it tonight, Caleb said. I know, Emily said, but I think I need to. She looked at him. There may be something in it we need for tomorrow. Clara touched her arm briefly, a simple, grounding contact, and then said, I'll go find Hadley, and walked away with the quiet tact of a woman who understands when to leave space. Emily sat down on the front step. Caleb sat beside her, close but not crowding. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. Her father's handwriting filled both sides, the same careful hand from the ledger, but slightly different here. Slightly more personal, the formality of the accounting work set aside. She read it in the last of the daylight. She read it once, and then she read it again. And the second time through, she felt the tears that she had been holding at bay for a week finally find their way past the place where she had been holding them. Not as a collapse, but as a release, the specific, necessary release of someone who has been carrying something alone and has just been told, in the voice she loved most in the world, that they were never as alone as they thought. Her father had written, I don't know who will read this. I don't know if it will be you, my girl, or someone I haven't met yet. But I built this in the hope that it would be you because you are the most capable person I have ever known, and because you deserve to know that I understand exactly what I am asking. I am asking you to finish something I started and could not complete. I am asking you to carry the truth one step further than I was able to carry it. That is not a small thing to ask. It is, in fact, the largest thing I have ever asked of anyone. But I also know this. You have never in your life been willing to look away from something that mattered. Not once. I have watched you your whole life, and that is the truest thing I know about you. The evidence is real. The witnesses are real. The case is real. Whatever happens, trust it. Trust yourself. And if someone stands up for you in a room where nobody else will, trust them too. Those people are rare. They are worth everything. I love you, Emily. Finish it. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope and held it in both hands in her lap. Caleb said nothing. She let herself be quiet for a long moment, a minute, maybe two. In the dark, with her father's words held against her palms, and the valley spread out around her. The same valley he had looked at from this step 10,000 times. The same stars coming up in the same Arizona sky. Then she stood up. All right, she said, let's go. Caleb rose beside her. The letter, he said quietly. Was there anything we need? Everything we need, she said. She tucked the envelope back inside her coat, next to everything else she was carrying. He said the evidence is real. He said trust it. She looked at Caleb. And he said if someone stands up for you in a room where nobody else will trust them. Caleb was very still. Caleb said, 4 months ago, Emily said, before he knew your name, before he knew you were coming. She looked at him steadily. He wrote it because he understood what it means when one person chooses to stand. She went inside to prepare for tomorrow. Caleb stood in the yard for a moment in the dark, alone. He thought about a trading hall, a corner table, a woman with a pine box, and the specific moment when he had pushed back his chair and stood because it was the only thing that seemed worth doing. He had not known in that moment that an old man 4 months dead had somehow already accounted for him. He put his hat back on. Then he rode to Martha Collins to tell her she was needed in the morning. The filing happened at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning in the Red Hollow Justice Building, a single room that served as the territory's local records office, a space for official notarizations, and the nearest thing the town had to a courthouse when circuit court was not in session. George Hadley, the notary, was there. So was Martha Collins, who had arrived at dawn with her copy of the land office notation in a manila envelope she had been keeping in a locked box under her bed for 3 years. Henry Parker was there, his 4 pages of statement already prepared, his jaw set in the particular expression of a man who has committed to something and is past the point of reconsidering. Clara Abbott was there because she had made herself indispensable to the logistics of the last 48 hours, and no one had suggested she shouldn't be. And Thomas Reed was there. He had come early, before anyone else, standing outside the building in the thin morning air, with his hat in his hands and his daughter beside him, because he had decided that if he was going to do this, he was going to do it with Lily present, so that someday she would be able to remember that her father had stood up. Emily saw Thomas and Lily when she arrived, and she walked straight to him. He looked at her with the exhausted, determined expression of a man who has not slept and is running on something stronger than sleep. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the night in the trading hall, for not moving. For you're here now," Emily said. "I should have been there then." "Yes," she said, "but you're here now, and that matters." He nodded. His daughter was looking up at Emily with the open curiosity of a 9-year-old who understands that something important is happening without yet having the context to know what. "Your daddy," Emily said to Lily, "is doing something very brave today." Lily looked at her father. Thomas Reed looked at his daughter. And whatever had been holding him to the edge of that final decision let go. Franklin Cross arrived at 9:55 with a leather case and the brisk authority of a man who expects procedural deference. He saw the assembly in the Justice Building and stopped in the doorway with a particular quality of calculation moving across his face. He looked at Caleb. "Walker," he said. "Cross," Caleb said. "You were a federal investigator," Cross said. "Past tense. Your credentials were fraudulently revoked," Caleb said. "The evidence supporting that revocation was manufactured by Raymond Blackwell as part of the same network we are filing against today. That will be documented in the filing and adjudicated by Judge Marsh at the hearing." He paused. "You're welcome to challenge it." Cross looked at the people assembled in the room. Martha Collins with her manila envelope, Henry Parker with his statement, Thomas Reed with his hat in his hands and his daughter beside him, Horace Lund's sworn statement in a leather satchel, James Whitfield's formal findings on the fraudulent deed of trust, telegraphed from Tucson the previous evening. He looked at all of it with the rapid professional assessment of a man who has spent a career identifying procedural weaknesses and was, Emily could see, having significant difficulty locating one. "You filed a contest notice in Tucson," he said. "We did," Caleb said. 2 days ago. It's already registered, and you've notified Marsh's clerk." "We have." He acknowledged receipt yesterday evening. Cross set his leather case down on the nearest table. He opened it, looked at the documents inside, and then looked at the room again. He was a man, Emily thought, who was very good at his work, and part of being very good at his work was knowing when the work was not going to produce the outcome his client had purchased. "The Thomas Reed statement," Cross said. "If he is a current employee of Victor Blackwell's ranch operation, his testimony may be considered compromised by." "He resigned his position this morning," Clara Abbott said from across the room, "effective as of 7 o'clock. I have the written notice here." Cross looked at Clara. Clara looked back at him. "He gave notice," Cross said flatly. "In writing," Clara said, "which George Hadley was kind enough to notarize at 7:15. George Hadley, seated at his desk, produced the document without being asked and set it on the table in front of Cross. Franklin Cross stood very still for a moment. Then he closed his leather case. "I'll be communicating with my client," he said. "Of course," Caleb said. Cross left. The door closed behind him. The room was silent for approximately 3 seconds. And then George Hadley said, very mildly, "Shall we begin?" And the notarization process started. Statement by statement, signature by signature, each one witnessed and sealed and entered into the official record with the irreversible finality of things that have been officially committed to paper. Thomas Reed signed his statement last. 19 years of silence, ending with a pen and a signature and a 9-year-old watching from a chair by the window. Emily watched him sign it and thought of her father writing in his ledger by lamplight. Year after year, page after page, building a record that he believed would matter, even when everything around him suggested it would not. He had been right. It had taken longer than it should have. It had cost more than it should have. But he had been right. Judge Aldous Marsh arrived in Red Hollow 11 days later. He was not what Emily had expected, not the severe, distant figure she had constructed from Caleb's description of his thoroughness. He was a compact man in his 60s with a reading-worn quality about him. Someone who had spent decades in courtrooms and had arrived at a particular comfortable authority, the kind that does not need to perform itself. He read the filing in its entirety before the formal hearing. He read it on the road, and when he arrived he had specific questions, not skeptical questions, not procedural ones, but the questions of a man working to understand the full scope of what he was looking at. Victor Blackwell arrived at the hearing with Franklin Cross, and a composed, expensive certainty that Emily recognized from the trading hall, the certainty of a man who has never been definitively beaten at anything and has constructed his worldview around that fact. That certainty lasted approximately 40 minutes into the hearing. Martha Collins testified about the Pruitt alteration. She testified precisely and without embellishment, the way 11 years of professional record-keeping had trained her to speak facts, dates, specifics, the altered debt amount, the 6-week gap in filing, the conversation with the administrator who did nothing. Marsh asked 3 follow-up questions. Cross asked 6. None of them shook her. Henry Parker testified about his land. He spoke slowly, like a man lifting something heavy and not willing to drop it, and he told the complete story: the signed agreement, the debt discrepancy, the 3 years of closed doors. He looked at the judge rather than at Victor Blackwell, and Emily noticed that he never looked away once. Thomas Reed took the longest. He sat down in front of Judge Marsh, and he told the story of a 17-year-old boy sweeping a back room and hearing 2 men design a system for stealing a valley. He told it in the particular detail of someone who has replayed a memory so many times over 19 years that every word is worn smooth with the handling. The warehouse, the voices, the names Raymond and Victor, said with the casual confidence of men who believed absolutely that no one who mattered would ever hear them. The room was silent in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. It was the silence of people hearing the architecture of something laid bare, understanding not just what had been done but how it had been designed to be done, the specific intention of it, the cold, deliberate construction of a machine for taking what belonged to other people. Victor Blackwell's face, by the time Thomas Reed finished, had the quality of a man who has just discovered that the ground he built everything on was not as solid as he had always believed. Cross attempted a procedural challenge to Caleb's evidence on the grounds of his credential status. Marsh listened to the argument for 4 minutes and then said, with the measured precision of someone who has already read the relevant documents and formed a complete opinion. The evidence gathered by Mr. Walker will be admitted in full. The revocation of his credentials is itself under examination as part of this proceeding, and I find that excluding evidence on the basis of a potentially fraudulent revocation would constitute a circular injustice that this court is not willing to commit. Move on. Cross moved on. Horace Lund's written statement was read into the record. The survey certificate copy was entered into evidence. Whitfield's findings on the fraudulent deed of trust were entered. The coded map of the valley's properties was entered. 7 years of Emily's father's ledger entries were entered. And then Emily stood up. Marsh looked at her. Miss Carter, he said, you may address the court. She had prepared something. She had written it out and read it back and revised it and read it again. But standing in front of Judge Marsh, with the full filing on the table, and Victor Blackwell 3 rows behind her and the people of Red Hollow filling every seat in the room, she did not use the prepared statement. She spoke instead from the place where the letter had reached. The place her father's words had found when she read them on the front step in the dark. My father spent 7 years documenting what happened to this valley, she said. He was a quiet man, a careful man. He didn't like confrontation and he wasn't interested in being a hero. He was interested in the truth and in making sure that when the truth was finally ready to be told, it would be told correctly. She paused. He died before he could tell it himself. I do not know, and I may never know exactly what happened to him. But I know why it happened. I know that a man who spent 15 years systematically stealing from people he had power over decided that my father was a threat. And I know that the threat my father represented was not violence, was not money, was not influence. It was a ledger, a map, a pine box full of careful records. She did not look at Blackwell. She looked at Marsh, because Marsh was the person who needed to hear this. I walked into the Red Hollow Trading Hall 2 weeks ago with that box because I believed that the truth, stated clearly in front of witnesses, was enough to start something, she said. I was not wrong about that, but I was wrong about how it would happen. I thought the 40 men in that room would stand up. Most of them didn't. One did. She paused. And the thing I have learned in the 2 weeks since that night is that one person standing is almost never actually just one person. It is every person who decided not to stand, but who kept the truth alive in their own way. Waiting, the farmer who kept his records, the clerk who made an extra copy, the old surveyor who never threw anything away, the teacher who knew which question to ask. The one person standing is the visible part of a much larger invisible act of refusal to forget what was real. She looked down at the table for a moment. "My father built this case," she said. "He built it knowing he might not live to use it. He built it so that someone else could. I am asking this court to honor the 7 years of work he put into the truth. Not on my behalf, on behalf of every person in this valley who was told their voice didn't matter." She sat down. The room was very quiet. Judge Marsh wrote something in his notes. He wrote for a long time. Then he looked up. "Mr. Blackwell," he said, "you and your counsel will have the opportunity to respond. But I want to be direct with you before we proceed. The volume and quality of evidence before this court is substantial. The corroboration between independent witnesses across a 19-year timeline is not something that procedural challenges are going to resolve. If you have substantive answers to the specific documented allegations in this filing, this is the time to provide them." He paused. "If you do not, I would encourage your counsel to consider what an uncontested adjudication might look like compared to a contested one." Victor Blackwell looked at Franklin Cross. Cross leaned toward him and said something quietly. Whatever Cross said, Blackwell's response was the particular stillness of a man who has run every calculation available to him and arrived at a number he does not like. The hearing lasted 3 more days. It was not simple, and it was not clean, and there were moments when Cross found narrow procedural threads to pull at, and Marsh had to untangle them with the careful patience of a judge who has no interest in being reversed on appeal. There were moments when Blackwell's team produced counter-documentation that required Caleb and Emily to counter-document the counter-documentation, a paper battle conducted with the focused intensity of people who know that each exchange matters. But the shape of the thing had been established in that first day. The architecture was clear. The intention was documented. The witnesses were present and consistent and unshaken. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Judge Aldous Marsh issued his preliminary findings. Victor Blackwell's land acquisition activities, going back to the original Crane deed in 1876, were found to constitute a pattern of deliberate fraud conducted in conspiracy with Gerald Pruitt and enabled by the systematic corruption of territorial records. The Arizona Valley Development Company deed of trust against the Carter Ranch was declared void. All properties acquired through fraudulent instruments were subject to a review process that would determine appropriate remediation. Blackwell's assets were frozen pending the full investigation, and Caleb Walker's federal credential revocation was flagged for formal review by the Territorial Administration, with Marsh's written recommendation that the charges used to justify the revocation be investigated as potentially fraudulent, the first official step toward restoring what had been taken from him 7 years ago. Victor Blackwell was arrested in the Red Hollow Courthouse. He walked out in handcuffs with the particular dignity of a man who has not yet fully understood what has happened to him, still carrying the residual confidence of 15 years of certainty, not yet arrived at the place where that certainty would finally run out. He would get there. Emily watched them take him out. She was standing beside Caleb, close enough that their arms were almost touching, and she felt the particular full-body exhale of something that has been held for a long time, finally releasing not joy exactly, not triumph exactly, but the deep and specific relief of a weight that has been transferred from the place it was never supposed to live. Thomas Reed came to find her after. He stood in front of her with his hat in his hands, the same posture as the morning of the filing, but everything behind it was different. The held-in quality was gone. He looked lighter in a way that was not physical, but that showed in his face and his shoulders, and the specific way he was breathing. "Your father came to talk to me once," he said. "About 2 years ago. He knew I'd been at that warehouse in 1876. He didn't push. He just said, 'When you're ready, I hope you'll tell the truth.' And I said I didn't know if I'd ever be ready." He paused. "He said that was all right. He said the truth would wait." Emily felt her father in those words so specifically, so exactly his voice, his patience, his particular brand of faith. "He was right," she said. "He was a good man," Thomas Reed said. "Yes," Emily said, "he was." The weeks that followed were not simple. The territory's land review process was slow and bureaucratic, and required constant attention and documentation and follow-up that fell largely to Emily and Caleb working together out of the Carter Ranch, which had stopped being a place where Emily was alone and started being a place where work happened, where Martha Collins came on Tuesdays to review the review board's decisions, where Parker stopped by to check progress on the negotiation over his lower 40 acres. Caleb's credential review moved quickly once Marsh's recommendation was in the official record. Within 3 weeks, the Territorial Administration had opened a formal investigation into the Raymond Blackwell network. The same investigation that had been suppressed 7 years earlier, now reopened with the full weight of the Marsh findings behind it. Caleb's reinstatement was not yet official, but it was on its way, and he had stopped describing himself as a former investigator. One morning in November, Emily came out of the house to find him replacing a broken hinge on the barn door. He was doing it with the particular focus of someone who is doing a small practical thing, while thinking about something larger. And when she came up beside him, he stopped and looked at her in the particular way that had developed between them over the last weeks, direct and honest and carrying something more than the words that accompanied it. "Clara told me something this morning," he said. "What?" Emily said. "She said that the men from the trading hall, the ones who didn't stand up that night, they've been coming by the Land Review Board hearings." He went back to the hinge. "Not testifying, just attending." He paused. "She said she thinks they're waiting for a way to help that feels possible. That doesn't require the kind of courage they couldn't find 2 weeks ago." Emily looked at the valley, the clear November light. Her father's land around her, still hers, the fraudulent deed voided and filed away, and the review board working on every property that had been taken the wrong way. "People find their way at different speeds," she said. "Yes, Caleb's they do." He finished the hinge. He tested the door, swing open, swing closed, easy and clean. He did not pack his gear. He had not packed it in the morning for the last 3 weeks. Emily had noticed but said nothing, because some things deserve the space to simply be true without being named. "My father's letter," she said. "He wrote, if someone stands up for you in a room where nobody else will, trust them. Those people are rare. They are worth everything." Caleb turned to look at her. She held his gaze in the specific way she had learned meant, "I am telling you the exact truth, and I need you to receive it. I trust you," she said, "and you are worth everything it cost to find you." He was quiet for a moment. Then Caleb Walker, who had spent 9 years running from what was done to him, who had arrived in Red Hollow without a name that meant anything to anyone, who had stood up in a dark corner of a trading hall because it was the only thing that seemed worth doing. He set down his tools and looked at the woman who had walked into a room full of cowards and refused to be silent. And he understood that the place Urban had spent years trying to get back to was not always the place they had left. Sometimes it was somewhere new. Sometimes it was standing in a barn doorway in November with the valley around you and the work not yet finished, and someone beside you who had chosen you the same way you had chosen them, not because it was safe, but because it was right. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Emily nodded. She did not elaborate on how much those 4 words meant. She did not need to. They both understood that the legend spreading across the Arizona territory was not the story of a cowboy who defeated the most powerful man in the valley. It was the story of a woman who refused to be silent, and what happened when one person in a room full of 40 chose to stand with her, and how that single act of standing, that one refusal to look away, became the proof that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. In a territory that had learned to believe that power belonged to the man who owned the most, Emily Carter and Caleb Walker had proved something different. The truth, carried faithfully and spoken clearly, belongs to everyone. And no one, not the wealthiest rancher, not the most connected lawyer, not 15 years of carefully constructed fear, can take it away from the people willing to stand and say it out loud.